guys, and welcome to Anchor to Truth. Today we are diving into part 3 of our chapter 21 through 30 breakdown of Jubilees. And today we are again joined by our awesome guest, Sean Griffin, who's always faithful to be here with us during these 10 chapter breakdowns. Sean, what's been going on with you lately, brother?
Hey guys, thanks for having me back. Sean Griffin, the Kingdom of Context. And yeah, what's been going on lately is we're continuing to do interviews, debates, do teachings on the channel. We're also still working on our animated project, Days of Noah. We're excited about that. Working on episode 2. This is a huge project we're doing. So if you guys want to check that out, you can check it out not only on YouTube, but on Lighthouse, Days of Noah. So we're excited about that. It's just a big, long project to get up and off the ground officially. And also we just launched our own tea. So if you guys like herbal hot tea, that helps with all sorts of things that we can't really go into great depth about on YouTube. Yeah.
And even if you don't like tea, I've heard that there's people that don't really care for tea that's been loving this. So I'm looking forward to getting some myself.
Yeah, it's good flavors, especially if you add a little bit of organic honey to it and, add some sweetener to it. It's also really good flavors for the tea. Very good things that it's the organic ingredients will help you with certain things. We can't make any medical claims, but you can also check that out on lighthouse.com at the Brave Tea Store. So that's something to check out and read up on it and see if you want to try it for yourself. I love it. I drink it literally daily, right? So I drink the Tree of Life blend almost daily, and then the Sabbath Rest blend I'll have 2-3 times a week, especially on the Sabbath, as you can imagine. So good stuff.
Hey, Sean, I got a question for you. When are you coming out with the Tree of Good and Evil blend?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know about that.
I'm just kidding.
I guess we could put that would like what kind of organic leaves could I put in there to even that'd be weird. Because okay, so basically like I put one strand of hemlock in there and just shake it up and see which tea is gonna have the hemlock in it. So
there you go.
It's like Russian roulette but with a tea bag.
There you go.
Lord have mercy.
Enlighten us.
Yeah. Oh boy. Well, we are down to the last 3 chapters in this block that we have. So we got 28, 29, and 30 to cover in this group, but there is a lot of good stuff left in here. So where should we start, boys? What you got?
Did you guys I didn't see your full breakdown on your review of these chapters, but did you guys go over like all the meanings of the names of the sons of Jacob? Because this whole chapter 37, have all the boys being birthed.
We did not get into the meaning of the names. Yeah,
I don't have any kind of big presentation prepared. I just thought it was interesting that all these names have a meaning to them, both in Genesis and Jubilees. As far as like when they were born, what circumstances they were under, and then it's very interesting. I saw someone trying to break this down in the past, where the names of the tribes that are mentioned in the Book of Revelation, if they put the meanings of the names together, from chapter 7 and the order that they're mentioned, it actually says a unique sentence basically. It's like a little hidden thing, but it's interesting that like my heart breaks for Rachel and Leah having this weird competition about having babies and finding their worth in having these babies, and both not just their worth as a person but also to their husband, because this is I believe why the Torah tells you not to marry two sisters. We're seeing that like exemplified in great emotional detail in chapter 37 of Jubilees. I keep saying 37. I meant to say chapter 28. I don't know what's going on in my brain. I think it was because I saw a thumbnail that you guys just recently released about chapter 37. So it's
exactly.
Right. Chapter 28 is what we're actually talking about, where Rachel and Leah keep having this war for having offspring. And they're jealous of each other, and they're trying to find their worth and their favor with having more children, which is it's just wild to me, because it's like Jacob just worked 14 years for you both. Like, is that not worth? Like he just protected you from your corrupt father-in-law, or from your corrupt father who destituted you guys financially and brought you out with wealth, and has been a good leader and provider for your family, trusting in the Lord. Like there's a ton of worth there, but unfortunately these ladies are still struggling with their own worth.
Well, and you could kind of see a little bit of where that stems from is, he's like, hey, Rachel, I love you. You're awesome. You're beautiful. Can't wait to marry you. Working 7 years. Okay. You know what? 7 years is worth it. And then, you come to find out it's Leah there when you wake up. So there's already some strife built into the story. Jacob's like, I feel cheated. Leah's like, I was just used. I just got thrown in the bed with you. I didn't even love you. I don't even like you. You weren't even in my list. And then Rachel is sitting on the sideline like, what just happened? I lost my husband in front of my own eyes, and there's nothing I can do about it because I'm going to follow biblical laws and do things appropriately. So that tension was built in from the beginning. This is, and when you really go back, where does it all stem from? It stems from Laban doing what Laban wanted to do was, well, it's according to our tradition that, the oldest must be gone in marriage first, which I'm sure is the case. And that probably was proper order, but that wasn't their agreement. That wasn't what they agreed on. So yeah, it's just, there's all this dynamics that are starting off before they even have the kids. It's whose wife is who and when and how. And Jacob's like, you know what, Rachel, you're so worth it. I'll do it all over again just to make sure I get you. And what that does is that shows Leah, hey, you're not good enough. I still want her. And what does that show Rachel? Okay, well, I'm not even the first wife. I'm not even the matriarch of the family. I'm number 2. Like, oh no. So, it's just this built-in drama just the whole time.
Yep. Joe lovingly calls this situation the birthing wars.
Mm-hmm.
We should do
we could call it Game of Wombs.
Yeah, great title.
I like that one. So let me ask you, Sean, what is your thoughts on Laban after reading through this? I'm sure multiple times, and we're reading it in the canon. What is your feelings about Laban, though?
All right, let me throw one more thing in there before you answer that, because that's kind of where I was going. I was wanting to get your take on him, because I find it very interesting. And Jonathan just kind of brought it up in verse 6 in chapter 28 here. It says, and Laban said to Jacob, it is not done so in our country to give the younger before the old elder. And it is not right to do this, for thus it is ordained and written in the heavenly tables that no one should give his younger daughter before the elder, yada, yada, yada. I find this really odd that, he's, worshiping idols. He's doing all this pagan stuff. But when it's convenient for him, he's throwing up that it's, written on the heavenly table. So it's not like he doesn't know. Yeah, it's not like he doesn't know what's written. He knows the word. So he's throwing that up, as a reason to do this, but still doing all the idol stuff. So anyway, yes, in responding to Joe, I'd like to hear your take on that as well.
Yeah, it's along the lines of what you just said, which is Laban seems like a very manipulative man whom is willing to pull from anywhere he can to get his way. Even if that means he's got to act like he, is a follower of Yah for a minute in order to, and could just as an actual polytheist, he could just be worshiping Yah, just like in the days of Ezekiel when the Israelites were confused and deceived and started worshiping other gods while worshiping Yahweh as well. So he could be in that vein where he thinks it's okay that he can entertain all these idols, have these household teraphim, and also have the writings of Yahweh in his house. But this, of course, brings up the amazing $1 million question, which is, what's he talking about? Where's he getting this information? What are we talking about here? So let's look. Laban is the father-in-law of Jacob, but Laban was the brother of Rebekah, right?
Yes.
Okay. So Abraham and Isaac sent their servant to go find a wife for Isaac in Aramea to Sarah's people. Is that right? So this is like the descendants. These are the descendants of Sarah's people and Abraham's people, like extended cousins, if you will.
Right.
Yep.
So I'm just wondering how much interaction they may have had with Abraham, who's the righteous man of Yahweh, in order for them to even have knowledge of God's ways and some sort of, because he's talking about this is written down the heavenly tablets. Who told him that? Like, who are you? Where'd you come from? So like this reminds me of like, in the days of Moses when his Zipporah's father-in-law, the chief high priest of Midian, comes along talking about, oh, now I know that Yahweh is the Most High God. And you're like, so you knew about him, but you were on the fence about him? Like, what's going on here? Why are you called a high priest of God from the land of Midian, but yet now you're saying that you realize he's the Most High God who's more powerful than all the other gods? Like, it seems as if there was just all levels of deception happening around this family that has the spotlight on them, and different, you know, how bad doctrine works into people over time. You know, they make compromises. So I'm just wondering if Laban is like that, because we see his fruit seems to be like that. His fruit is, I will manipulate the circumstances to get my way, even if that means changing Jacob's wages 10 times over 20 years. And I don't think he gave him a raise in any one of those changes.
I don't either.
So this is why Jacob has to come up with this unique plan in order to get value for himself out of these flocks. So to me, it seems like he's the man that is not dumb. He's a conniver, and he's willing to act like, you know, he worships God of heaven and earth, like Sarah and Abraham did when it suits him to manipulate the situation. But ultimately, he's, you know, I've actually known people like this in my life, and I just had to cut ties. Just like Jacob did. You just have to leave. You just have to say, bro, we're done. Hard, stiff hand to you. You know, just give them the Heisman. You know what I mean? Just have to, because they'll always try to find a way to connive themselves into your life, so they can, for whatever reason, you know, even if it's just their own. But Laban's in a totally different scenario with his daughters and everything, and now he's like entrenched into the family through marriage and also inheritance. But I doubt he's leaving any inheritance for Jacob.
Yeah, and Sean, to your point there, it's like Laban knows some stuff. Seemingly, he figured it out, or, you know, he's aware of some information. But I actually had the obverse question, the opposite question, whatever that right word is why did Jacob not know that? You know, why is it Jacob showing up? Oh, I'll marry the second daughter, and he's like, no, that's not how it works, dude. Like, I'm actually right on this one. So Laban was technically correct based on his admission. So then, you know, what was Jacob learning? You know, why is Jacob like, oh, this is the first time I've heard this information, news to me. I thought I was, you know, in the right doing this. So that's where there's that interesting dynamic of, wait, Laban's more correct and Jacob's more wrong. Is this part of Jacob's, like, you know, that's his upbringing? That's a part of his origin story. He's like, no, you got to be wrong before you can be right. You got to crawl before you can walk, type of deal. Or was it just, hey, it is what it is, and he was excited about the pretty lady?
I think verse 5 tells us exactly what's going through Jacob's mind. It says that Rachel has beautiful eyes and beautiful and very handsome form. So, you know, he may not have assumed that they kept the same customs or abided by the same law, especially if he knew that Laban was polytheism. He may not have assumed that Laban would do this sudden callback to God's ways and heavenly tablets. He may have just thought, I'm going to marry this girl. Look at her. You know what I'm saying?
And well, I mean, we're not told every detail of every situation, right? We're told the main points that the Father wants us to know that needed to be written down in the Word. I mean,
look, I've seen a lot of attractive women in my life, but I've never wanted to work 14 years for one. You know what I'm saying? So, like my wife today, I give my life for her now, but when I first met her, I didn't know her that well. You know what I'm saying? Again, any model you've ever seen that the world thinks is beautiful or whatever, like I've never just been so enamored where I was just going to be simping for her for 14 years suddenly. So I think Jacob is wrapped up. Jacob got you know, he got enticed. But I don't know what she said, and we don't get that conversation. Like, but he got enticed by Rachel for sure.
Well, he definitely did. But I mean, there's also the possibility that, you know, there was some kind of understanding, you know, if that maybe she was already betrothed to someone or promised to someone. If Laban was agreeing to him taking the daughter that he was choosing, if he agreed to that, then he must have the other situation worked out. I mean, again, there could be some trickery involved in that, which clearly we know that in the end there was. But so I don't know. I don't know if there was any other trickery to make him feel like there was already something in play for her. I don't know. For the elder.
You mean Rachel? Like Laban was giving Jacob the impression that Rachel was already taken somehow?
Or yes, potentially. Okay. Potentially. I don't know. Just throwing that out there, that's a possibility, I guess.
I don't know.
I have the idea that Esau was supposed to have married her.
Okay.
The elder.
Yeah. I was actually going to go there. I was, you know, if Esau would have not been who he was, then he should have been
did what he
one.
was supposed to do.
He could do what he's supposed to do, right?
He would
Yeah.
have married Leah.
Right. He should have been the one that married Leah.
That'd be interesting.
But because he's off marrying other women,
Right. He's took, what, 2 Canaanite wives.
yeah, Canaanite wives. That's right.
Yeah.
So if he would have been doing what he was supposed to do, then he would have married Leah. Then Jacob would have came in and married Rachel, and then. But at the end of the day, all I can say is God's in control. He's got a plan, because between those 2 ladies and 2 more, we get the birth of the 12 tribes of Israel. So,
okay, I think I see what you guys are getting at. So you're saying, like, growing up, it could have been talked about around Jacob's family, around Isaac's family, that,
Right.
Hey, we got your cousins up in Aramea, and Esau, we'd love for you to be betrothed to Leah, Jacob. You can have Rachel. And then as they grew up and circumstances changed, and then he finally goes up there as he's running from Esau, he runs into Rachel, whom he already thought, well, she was possibly. Yeah. I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just so much to this. I mean, if Esau would only have done what he was supposed to have done, how differently would this story be? Would we have an example of Esau being a king and Jacob being the high priest? Would we have some other dynamic? Like, what would this look like? Would Esau have done what he was supposed to do from the very beginning? Now, obviously, the father had this planned out. He knew how everything was going to go, right? It's why from the beginning, Jacob was supposed to get the blessing and all that, right? So,
well, it was prophesied to his mother Rebecca. She already had the dream, and then Abraham's backing it up. So they already know this is how it's going to play out,
right?
So unfortunately.
So
interesting.
Anyway, just some things.
Yeah, those are fun thoughts, man. I think, there's just so much going on here. I'd like for the father to just have a little chat with an angel sometime. You know what I mean? Just be like, like basically the chat that Moses is having with the angel for the book of Jubilees. But I would have asked some additional questions. You know what I'm saying? Just a few questions here. But there's a lot going on as far as like all these children being born while they're in the household of Laban. So that means they're growing up. This perspective is what I always thought was interesting. They're growing up watching their father struggle with this.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know about you guys, your experiences, but I watched my father struggle at certain times in his life, but then God gave him consistency and blessed him, for the latter years that I've been alive. But when I was younger, I remember, them talking about budgets being tight and, oh, we can't afford to go do this or that's, whatever. And can you imagine growing up? Like, because we see there's some dialogue later amongst the sons of Laban as far as when Jacob's trying to leave.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're like, how many sons are those and how do they interact with Jacob's boys? And it sounds like Jacob's boys, you don't mess with them.
Right.
So there's a lot going on here that I would love to see to be a fly on the wall and to see this dynamic. But I love verse 14 where it talks about Levi being born on the new moon of the first month.
Mm-hmm.
It seems significant, especially if you go and you add up all the significant moments that happen in the book of Jubilees on the first moon of the first month, new moon. There's some interesting stuff. The angels appeared to Abraham, all this kind of stuff. Interesting concepts happen. So,
Yep. Now, was this a sliver? What was this? No, I'm just kidding. Totally.
I think it's chapter 6, the 364 day. So they knew exactly when this 91st day was going to be.
Yep.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Absolutely. Good stuff.
Very, very interesting. So we get the concepts going on like further into the chapter about Bilhah. Bilhah and Zilpah being introduced as far as, being handmaidens of Rachel and Leah. And then they're like, all right, we're sterile at the moment. We've got all this crazy envy going on between the sisters. So here, take my handmaid. I've talked about my wife with this. I've talked with my wife about this concept often throughout the years. Like we'll sit at dinner and just talk, not even on camera, just talking amongst us and about how I cannot put myself in that mindset. Like I just cannot put myself in that mindset of for one, we don't have a handmaid. But two, if I was wealthy and had like a lot of servants or something, I just can't. For one, my wife's definitely not of that personality to be like, oh, I want to have more babies. I can't have them. Here, take on a second wife.
Right.
And then two, I'm not the dude. I'm not the guy for that. Guys, you know, I love my wife, and it is a grace for God that I can please one woman. You know what I'm saying? Like, I cannot imagine trying to keep up with the expectations of multiple women in a household. And Jacob here is taking on 4. So God graced him with all kinds of love and patience and kindness. And
You know, I've kind of thought about that a lot. I wonder, is it because they spent so much time in the field that they were only back and for short periods of time? And when they were, it was like, I'm going to see you, then I'm going to see you, then I'm going to see you, then I'm going back to the field for the next 8 months, you know, or I don't know.
that's something that could be something too. It's not like Jacob working from home.
Right.
He's like, oh, I'll be gone. It's like he's more like a truck driver. I'll be gone for 6 days out in the field. I'll be back. I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah, I think the dynamic for sure was different. And I think, you know, what else is interesting, you know, something that I've had to play around with, like you said, Sean, you're having those at home conversations. This stuff I just kind of sit and ponder on. And verse 11, it says, Yahuwah opened the womb of Leah. And we get that phrase or that phraseology very often throughout scripture is Yahuwah opened or closed the womb. It's his choice. It's his plan. It's his desire. He's like, hey, if I want to bring an immortal soul into the world, but via these 2 humans, this male and female, that's my choice when and if I do that. And if I'm not in that mindset, you know, then that's just not going to happen. And it's hard to say because there's so many issues in the world today of, you know, people trying to have children or can or can't or whatever. And, you know, it really does seem like we have to leave it up to God. You know, it's his choice. It's his timing. And what we can do is do our best in that. And what we can do is live in the light and be one of his servants who follow after him and enjoy the blessing of children or enjoy the blessing of whatever it is that God's blessing us with. It doesn't say this is your only blessing. If you don't have this, then you have no blessing. This is one of the many blessings, or here's some other list of blessings. But it's always interesting to see that, you know, obviously they were all trying to have kids. That's why Zilpah and Bilhah show up in the first place. And God's like, oh, you now, and then you. Okay, now that you're done being jealous and weird, okay, now you can have a baby. You know, so it was kind of it really exposed their hearts a little bit of like through the childbearing process of who was in the right place at the right time, or who right place, right position with the Father.
Yeah, and you kind of see a little bit of a tiff when you go into verse 16 between Rachel and Jacob. And it says, on account of all this, Rachel envied Leah, for she did not bear, and she said to Jacob, come here, husband. He says, give me children. And Jacob said, have I withheld from thee the fruits of thy womb? Have I forsaken thee? You know, so it's like Jacob's kind of having this moment where he's like, I'm doing the best I can, woman.
Did my part.
I did my part. It's not me, okay?
Right.
Yeah, it's I've never had a woman speak to me like that, so don't exactly know how to react. But it seems to be like a typical man thing. He's like, "Wait, what? I'll do what I can. I'm trying to give you children here." Yeah, but I mean, this is in the midst of them already having children, and it's kind of interesting. I thought, like I mentioned earlier, with Levi on the first being born on the new moon of the first month. We also see Jacob looks like he's born right before Shavuot on the 15th of the 3rd month. And then Joseph is born on the new moon of the 4th month. And those 3 boys out of all 12 seem to be the most prominent throughout the rest of Israel's history. Levi, Judah, and Joseph. Joseph oftentimes being a euphemism for the northern house.
Yep.
Which later became the house of Ephraim. But so it's interesting that those 3 seem to have the most prominent, and those 3 have the most story about them throughout the rest of history. And they're all born around these very unique moments in time, according to the Father's calendar. So I don't know if they can plan that, though. Like, I don't, but with all this interaction, the reason why I was bringing this up is because I'm saying with all this back and forth with wombs being opened and closed and the rivalry between Rachel and Leah, I don't think Joseph or Jacob was planning on having these children at these times.
Well, I mean, think about his expectation when he shows up. He's thinking, I'm getting this woman. She's beautiful. I love her. And in his wildest dreams, he did not imagine I'm going to end up with 4 women.
And
when it's all
Right.
said and done.
Right.
I'm gonna work 14 years, but I'm gonna end up with 4 women when I leave out of this place, so it's so whatever dreams or aspirations that Jacob had, I think they're all shot there for a little bit. He's kind of like, okay,
Yeah.
this is gonna be life for a little bit, so let's make the best of it.
And at the end of it, he only finishes the race with 3 women because of Bilhah, who apparently Bilhah was quite a looker as well, according to Reuben anyway. So I'm just saying it's interesting to see this this dynamic. Again, I can't put myself in that place mentally, emotionally. I don't know how Jacob did it. I clearly, even to this day, there's people in other countries that have in the U.S. that have multiple wives. I just don't know how they do it. I don't feel like I have the personality for it, nor the desire, honestly. And
I'll tell you how they did it. Give me children. he kind of got told how to feel in that situation.
yeah, it's interesting because essentially he could have just said. Apparently it says, verse 6, Leah has weak eyes, but a very handsome form.
Right.
So he could have just said, you know what? I worked 7 years. I got a attractive lady. We'll just put the veil over from time to time. I don't know what it means by weak eyes. I don't know if you got like a total eye go on one side, the other. Like, I don't know what we're talking about here. I do know that my wife has beautiful eyes, and I would readily say that. People have told her that. I think that's a feature about her that people can say, oh, she has strong eyes or handsome eyes or attractive, pretty eyes. Like, it's one of her facial features that stands out. And I have seen women that don't have those same type of beautiful eyes. I'm hoping that's all that's being inferred here of Leah. I'm hoping she doesn't have like one eye that's cross-eyed or something. You know what I mean? But apparently she was, from the distance, she was attractive. She had a very handsome form. So I'm just saying he could have woken up after that wedding and realized what happened and just went back home, with one wife after 7 years. But instead, he wanted Rachel.
Yeah.
So it's like there's a lot going on here as far as him being willing to take on all these wives. Could he have told Rachel and Leah both, no, I'm not taking on your handmaids?
Probably.
It seems like it was his decision.
We'll just wait until Yahweh opens up your wombs.
Yeah.
But here he is doing this thing. It makes me wonder if he's thinking about Abraham in the back of his mind.
Exactly.
It's just an interesting thought. But I don't know. It's just more wives, more problems, in my opinion.
Well, that saying says happy wife, happy life. Jacob says happy wives, plural. I'm trying to make everybody happy, man.
Happy wives, Jacob thrives.
But again, at the end of the day, the 12 tribes are birthed through these 4 ladies, and we're not told any different if this is a bad thing or a good thing. I think culturally this was more accepted back then, of course, than it is today. And the thing about the children is, from what I understand, and it still is today, but even then, this was a sign of a blessing from Abba to be able to bear children. We have Hannah, who's, it's Hannah, right? It's in the temple. Yeah. And she's praying and, she's asking the Father for a child. And then she commits to saying, hey, by the way, if you let me have a child, I'm going to commit him back to you. And so, because there was this blessing there. And of course, with her situation, the other wife was messing with her and making fun of her because she was barren. But the Lord heard her prayer. And it was a beautiful thing. And so I think for this, culturally, this is really important that this is a sign that I have favor now with the Father. That He has given me a child, because I think people would look on others and go, wow, you're how old and you haven't had a child yet? And you've been married how long? And wow, well, you must not be doing something right, because, the children are a blessing from the Father. So you must be doing something wrong. So culturally, it would be like, this is a blessing. When you see people say, oh, you're so blessed. Look at all these children that you have. You're so blessed. And unfortunately, in society, they would look at women who are barren and go, well, she must have did something wrong, or, there's no blessing from God in your life.
You know what rhymes with blessed? No rest and stressed.
I don't know. It just kind of aggravates me a little bit that people will use these types of situations as an excuse, even today, to justify, multiple wives and things like that. Any of these stories that we read in Scripture about a man having multiple wives, in every situation, this is not something that the Father says, go and do this thing. In every situation, this is God blessing them in spite of what they're doing. And in addition to that, in some instances, after it's done, it tells us, don't do this anymore, right? Don't do these types of things. So, don't marry two sisters, kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, we don't have handmaidens anymore, and we know we're not supposed to marry sisters. The only other examples that we have are like David or Solomon or whatever. How'd that turn out for them? Like, we don't have good examples of multiple wives anywhere other than the Father blessing them in spite of what they're doing that I can think of. Can you guys think of anything where it's been a thing where God's saying, go and do this and get these multiple wives? And
it's never prescribed. This is what we talk about. It's never prescribed. It is described in the Torah as a after the fact, here's what you do now. Or it is only prescribed in the one instance of your brother died and his wife is left without an heir. And you can take
care of her.
But I shouldn't even use the word prescribed, because he still has the choice. And if he doesn't do it, she can throw the sandal at him and all that stuff and spit at him or whatever. And, she can publicly shame him for not taking on his brother's widow and providing an heir. So it still is his choice. It's not like the Father saying you must take on multiple wives. But I think we see in the days of Samuel, First Samuel, we see Hannah and his husband wasn't Hannah one of two wives to her husband?
Yeah, that's what I was saying earlier. Yeah.
So again, in that situation, it's not prescribed, but it is happening, and Hannah is struggling also, like Rachel and Leah, to conceive. So Father,
because even the husband in that situation was giving Hannah more portions of food. He said, "Hey, you are I love you. You are loved." But that conflict with the other wife, she's over there basically degrading her because she doesn't have a child yet.
Yeah.
So Eli hears her praying in the temple, and he's kind of thinking, at first he thought she was drunk or something, if I remember correctly. He's kind of like, why are you babbling over here, woman? And she's like, I'm not babbling, I'm praying to the Lord. I'm on a child. Blah, blah, blah. But
if that's not the most quintessential man response.
Oh yeah, give you more food here. Take this.
Like you're in an agricultural society when the woman's struggling to conceive. Let's fatten her up some. She'll be all right. She'll be able to. Maybe she's not ready to give birth yet. Let's fatten her up some. Like I don't even understand that mindset of like, oh, you need more food. Like, what are we talking about? What? Yeah, it's.
That's a man being a man. That's all.
That's right. Yeah, because that's what you do with a cow whenever they're too weak or whatnot.
Exactly. You got to give them all the nutrition so they have what they need to do that. Exactly.
Yep.
Well, we got the scripture. Never follow another man's heifer, so
Yeah.
Yeah, Kyle, you're welcome to cut all this out so you don't get canceled.
Yeah.
We're gonna let it ride right there. Well, going back to the multiple wives thing one more time is, why did they do that? Why was that standard of if your brother's wife, if your brother died or whatever, why take on his wife? Well, society was very different then. You didn't see women landowners. You didn't see a lot of things, like women weren't in the workforce per se, right? Like all the modern stuff we have now, our culture is very, very different. I mean, for goodness sakes, how many single mothers are there out there? I'm not saying that that's a good thing. I'm just saying that is a thing and doing just fine.
Well, but
struggling.
If I could add to but look at the perversion that second wave feminism has turned into third and fourth wave, which is
true.
These young women come up with the same mentality of, I want to be an independent boss babe, yet I don't want to actually put in the sweat equity. So therefore, I'm going to create an OnlyFans account and indenture myself to random men without the actual creature comforts. So it's like this weird perversion of they're taking on a sugar daddy. They're taking on support from a man, just lots of men in small increments.
Yeah.
Through prostitution, right? So it's like it's so sad because they're not actually independent. They still depend on the men to pay for their prostitution. It's really sad. So I understand what you're saying, because like in ancient days, if a woman is without a provider, whether a father or a husband, then she's in a tough spot.
It could be very dangerous for her to be in that position. Yeah.
Right. She may get pulled into, the forced temple prostitution of the foreign gods.
And the main point was for the sake of, so that the seed would continue on, correct?
In that particular, I think you're referencing was it Numbers 25?
It sounds right.
The husband with the house of one sandal or whatever. But yes, in that moment, in that scenario, it's for the widow to be taken care of both financially and through offspring, like Joe said, is the blessing of the Lord. Because then she's gonna have people to take care of her when she's older.
Well, and we can see all throughout Scripture, especially throughout the, as we call it, the Old Testament. It's all about life. It's all about taking care of. It's all about provision. We even see that scenario with Moses when they're going around and divvying out the land and the portion, and then all the ladies show up. We don't have any brothers, any fathers, no uncles. It's just us girls. What do we do? And he's like, let me go pray about it. And I love his approach to that. It's not just, let me just make a decision on the spot. Let me go talk to God and see what he has for us. Let me see what the right thing to do is. There's my way, there's the group's way, and then there's God's way. Let's do what God says. So he goes and prays about it, and he says, yeah, it is appropriate for you to maintain on your own as a single unit, a bunch of ladies or a few ladies and one lady, to have your own situation because of the scenario you're in. Not just, oh, let's flip the situation now and this applies to everybody at all times. It was, for this situation, let's to make sure you're taken care of, not let's make this the new rule and standard for all ladies. And I love that the scriptures go through that for us. Is there still is a proper order and form for things. There still is a way that God instituted life on earth, but he's also loving and caring and gracious to meet our needs when we have them. He's like, it was never intended for you to have literally no men in your life anywhere ever. But since you found yourself in that scenario due to war, famine, whatever, yeah, let's make sure you get taken care of. Of course, I would never say no to that.
Yeah, I mean, after as the point of Numbers 31 and onward, now we have all these daughters of Midian that were grafted into Israel. Where'd they go? They're taken care of now. Mm-hmm. They were given to priests. Did they ever get to marry? Did they ever get to step into an official tribe somewhere, get grafted in? I don't know how. We don't get all those details, but the Father definitely wants to take care of the ladies. That's what we try to. It breaks my heart when I see Christians like progressive Christianity talking about how the Old Testament was sexist, and I'm just sitting there going, tell me louder how little you've read the Old Testament, because it's so sad. Like the Father takes care of women at every step.
Yes,
like it's the responsibility of the man to take care of the women at every step so that they're cared and provided for. Now, if they want to go be a Proverbs 31 woman and create business and do all this other stuff and have, be in a place of being a landowner, business owner, and creating their own textiles and all that stuff, more power to them. But Father doesn't restrict them from that. And in the meantime, they always got the warmth of the backdrop of, I've either got a father, a brother, or a man in my life. And if I don't have any of those, then the priesthood and the general community was supposed to be there to care for them.
Yep.
So like, it's crazy, man.
This is the one thing, and I don't mean to keep beating this dead horse, but there's so many good points about this that just need to be talked about, especially in our community, guys. There's something that's going around a lot now, this idea of being sovereign, like sovereign marriage or whatever. And that's the term I've heard used a lot. It's essentially where people are getting married, but they're not involving the government, right? Mm-hmm. So now, granted, I like that idea. I don't think the government should be involved in any of my business. However, what are those? Why is the government involved? Well, yes, so they can make a little money off of you. Yes, so they can tax you and stuff like that. But what does that do for the woman? In the modern age that we are in, what does it do? Not just for the woman, but for the husband as well. What does it do for both parties? It protects them. Mm. What happens? You make this covenant before God. You and this woman make this covenant, and you decide 6 months down the road that it just ain't working out. you're going to justify it and however you see fit. Now you're going to end up getting separated, divorced, or whatever. Was it really a marriage in the first place? Who's holding your feet to the fire? Do you have a community of people? Do you have family members that's holding your feet to the fire? You know, that's saying, no, you can't do this thing. Like, this is a covenant you made and you're going to uphold it. You're going to take care of her, or you're going to do this. And if you don't, you know, there's going to be some bad stuff to deal with here. Like, we don't have people that's going to hold their feet to the fire. You know, I mean, even in amongst our church community, you know, our ecclesia, whatever you want to call it. I mean, we have people that consider doing those types of things. And I can be your best friend. I can love you to death, but I'm not going to be the one, you know, stoning you if you're screwing up. I'm not going to be the one to be able to hold your feet to the fire. That's why we have the stuff that we have in place in the society that we're in, is to hold your feet to the fire, make sure you uphold your commitment, your covenant. And if you don't, to protect both parties against the other one messing over the other one. So I don't know. I don't like this idea of sovereign marriages, because it just leaves too much on the table that can be either justified or a way for one person to get really messed over in the deal. So anyway, I'll leave it there. If y'all had anything to add to it, that's cool. Go ahead.
I know where you're coming from, because I understand the plight of, as someone that has been divorced in my early 20s and has paid child support for, he just turned 18 and we got divorced when he was 2. I totally understand that, and having an ex-wife who has, I'm going to be very, very careful with how I say this. It's been a rough situation. I'll just put it like that. It's been really rough for 16 years. Right. And as a result of that, I'm still ongoing issues with my firstborn son, my amazing son, whom I love very much. Right. But the state definitely protects her on that situation, regardless of the fruit of his life, regardless of all the common decent checkpoints of parenthood that you do not see being met. The state still protects her custody.
Right.
So I can understand from that side. I don't endorse the sovereign citizen movement and the sovereign citizen marriage, because I understand that our state laws are a poor replacement of God's Torah. I get that. And I stress the poor part. It's a poor replacement.
Yes.
And but at the same time, it's like, if you don't have a group of believers step in as your accountability structure, like you're saying, then chaos will reign. Yep. So at least the government is a poor replacement, where it may be heavily favored against the men, but it's not allowing absolute chaos to reign. So right. It's and this is where the Orthodox community is always complaining that they didn't like the fact that the United States, that the state took over the arrangement and enforcement of marriages away from the church, because they would rather govern that.
Yeah,
because they feel like you do. Whereas, like, the state's not the ideal situation for all these bad reasons, legal, financial. But then who else is going to do it, right? Who else is going to oversee this contract and in this relationship if it dissolves, or to keep it from dissolving? The state's not going to do that. The state gladly will take your divorce money filing fee and then gladly set up child support payments, because they literally are the banker in that situation and they get the money off of it. They get the transactional funds. So, but the church, or a responsible group of believers in a particular community, should be the ones to say, hey, let's talk together about the counseling. Let's figure out what the issues are, try to work it out as much as possible, encourage you guys to stay together. And that way it's better for everyone involved, especially the children.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a weird deal. Like, and it's funny because we're talking about Esau and Jacob, and the way Esau behaves, he behaves as if he comes from a broken home, even though he didn't.
Right.
He has no respect for his parents. He doesn't follow the religion of his parents, and he's off just acting like a wild child. Over spats with his brother. You would have thought Jacob was a stepbrother and Rebecca was a evil stepmom. You know, like, it's just weird how Esau has taken on this bad behavior and in this storyline, and you're just sitting there going, like, why? And this is where I think we mentioned this last time, but this is where I feel like Abraham was 100% justified as we see the fruit of Esau's life, for him to go privately to Rebekah and be like, we're going to have to do something about Isaac's decision making here.
Kind of makes me wonder, like, I mean, I don't have any stories of this, but, did he have some, bad friends that were influencing him? Or did he just spend so much time in the field away from home, and Jacob spent so much time at home that by the time he got back, it was, Jacob, 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 Jacob. And he's like, what about me? I don't know. He had too much time to think to himself. I don't know. Lots of things to ponder in that.
Don't forget, Isaac received all of Abraham's men.
Ah, that's right.
Isaac is not by himself in a tent. He's rolling with the whole community.
That's right.
And at that point, it was 318 trained men of war rolling with Abraham. So now their sons, they're like, what does that mean? Like, what does that look like?
Mm-hmm.
So you got an actual community that they're hanging out around. And Jacob goes to war against the Canaanites in his day. Or excuse me, Isaac goes to war against the Canaanites in his day. I can't remember what passage this is in, but remember that part where Isaac has to defend himself?
Yep.
Against the 5 Canaanite kings or whatever, and they're hiding behind trees or whatever. I can't remember exactly the story. Esau grew up witnessing all this. Who are all these? Because we don't get the rest of that story as far as all these other trained men and their children and their wives hanging out around Abraham, Isaac, and now Jacob. Because I mean, later I think we don't get this until the 30 chapters, 30 like 35 through 38 or whatever. But once Jacob and Esau go to war, Jacob's got a ton of men on his side.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it doesn't say that Levi and Jacob and Reuben, they're like put over 50s. They're in charge of men's of 50s and different divisions, basically. You know what I mean? I can't remember the exact details. So, but that means they had those men at their disposal to round up and mobilize.
Mm-hmm. We get some good details on that in the Testament of the 12 Patriarchs too.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I see like, though, we talk about like the kids and like their interactions with each other and stuff like that. And we see in 29 and 30 of this chapter where it's, goes on to say Jacob's possessions multiplied exceedingly. So, so Jacob's starting to win now. It's like, Esau had that initial push where he had the wives and the houses and all the stuff. And Jacob's like, oh man, I'm kind of behind the curve a little bit. Now he's getting his possessions multiplied exceedingly, all of the ox and the sheep and the camels and everything else. And then, we kind of get that bad behavior kids, and all of a sudden 30 says, and Laban and his sons envied Jacob. This is that same kind of dynamic that's playing out. It's like, okay, here we go again. Now it's the good kids and the bad kids and the good example and the bad example. And so it's like, and Laban took back his sheep from him and observed him with evil intent. It's like, what kind of man do you have to be to watch your daughters and watch your son-in-law and all these grandchildren and all this stuff? Laban is winning. Laban is enjoying the fruits of Jacob's labor. He's like, hey, me and my household is huge now. He's like, no, I'm taking my stuff back, and I'm going to start looking at you all side-eyed, and I'm going to teach my kids not to like your kids, and we're going to have this weird riff, pretty much start the story all over again. Jacob's like, I just left this environment where me and brother can't get along. Now all the kids can't get along. We're doing this again. So, and he had to leave home because of that scenario. Now he's got to leave this home because of that same scenario. It's just like, it's just very cyclical in Jacob's life.
Yeah, and it's because Jacob's trying to do the right thing, and these other people are not following God's ways.
Yep.
So there's, that's the common denominator in these stories, which is so sad because, it's like, I've jokingly called myself Jacob to my father earlier in my life, because I had a string of years where I kept having employment issues where I would do well at a company, then the company would either go out of business or I would get let go for reasons not explained. And there was no malconduct. There was no, much. I wasn't late for work. I didn't, mess up a big contract or anything. It just, even the one time it happened publicly in front of the entire company. People gasped because I was the top salesman that month. And for that, anyway. People were like, what is going on? It was such a weird moment. It's 8 a.m. At a morning meeting. Such a weird moment, right? And but that happened a few times during this certain time period of my life. And my dad was asking, like, what's going on? I was like, Dad, if you know, tell me. Because I don't know. I just feel like, I feel like I'm Jacob right now. Like I can't figure out how to keep my wages from changing because I'm trying to do the best I can everywhere I am with my skill set, with my background and everything. And I think the Father was just preparing me just for certain things. That's a much bigger story. But ultimately, I sympathize with Jacob because like he's trying to do well. He's dealing with this weird income situation. He finally starts to do well, and then Laban starts to look at him like he's up to no good. And you're just like, what? So I was at a company one time where I also had an idea to increase revenue for the company. I implemented it for 2 months, and revenue was increased. New contracts were happening, and I actually was at one of our weekly meetings. I was brought before all the other techs and all the other guys, and to tell them what I was doing and why and how, and it was increasing business. And the VP of sales in that company, he was embezzling hundreds of thousands of dollars from the company and decided to use me as the scapegoat. He never made an official accusation, but he made a lot of insinuations at the meeting with the owner of the company and the HR person as to why he suggested that I be fired. And he then used this new idea that I had that increased revenue and productivity to say, well, this is how he's bringing in. This is giving him an opportunity to do the things that could be why our books are off, is because of him. And all I was doing was just bringing in more contracts. And I'm sitting there going, but that's bringing in more contracts is very different from actually stealing money from the company.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? To which I didn't have even access to. I mean, I was just a salesperson. I didn't have access to that high level documents in the company or access to the funds. So the point is, he basically bamboozled me. He what do they call that? He sideswiped me, whatever you want to call it. Like he set me up as the one that they were to look at with suspicion. And then it came out like 6 months later, he actually got caught and he had to flee the state.
Yeah. He was trying to make you the scapegoat. That's what he was doing.
He was trying to take the attention off of him and why the books weren't matching, and trying to blame me for it without officially blaming me for it. And so, and of course the HR person, the owner of the company, fell for it. They let me go. And even though I told them, like, you know, I emphatically like had all the details, had all the receipts for all the contracts and everything, and was going over with them in my exit interview, to which I didn't have to really show up for, but I did because I was trying to do the right thing. I went over all these contracts and these details with the HR person to show her, and she's like, "What?" She was all confused. She goes, "Well, yeah, it's like you're taking the high ground." And I was like, "I didn't do anything to take the low ground. What are you talking about? Of course I'm taking the high ground." I was like, "This guy's lying about me. I don't know what else to say. Like, of course I'm taking the high ground. Call in all these contracts. You'll see." Like, so it was a bad situation. It was a weird situation. But so I can definitely sympathize with Jacob.
We're gonna have to compare some stories one day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and it's funny, we carry that same thought from Jacob to Joseph all the way through into the New Testament with Yeshua, you know, and he says, "And you will be hated for my name's sake, but the one who endures to the end will be saved." You know, so it's like, yes, you be prepared to not be winning in life. You know, you're not always going to find the what you think. You know, your plans aren't always going to work out, but my plans are better than your plans. And so, yeah, be prepared. Life's going to throw you a couple curveballs. You're not going to win every time when you probably normally would win for my name's sake. So because of that, if you endure to the end, then you'll be saved. So that's the ultimate goal there for Jacob, Joseph, all these guys are like, hey, just do what you're supposed to do. And guess what? You'll, on the back end, you'll be good to go either here on earth or in heaven with the crowns and jewels and your position in heaven. Be prepared for that. You know, if you lose a few on earth, they're just a couple lumps, you'll get over it. But you know, you don't want to lose that ultimate battle with a second death or anything like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, and with Jacob, you know, he knows how to play the game too, because we got the whole speckled sheep and all that going on. He's like, oh, so I get to keep all of what would be maybe the ugly looking sheep, but I get to keep those. Okay, you guys. So here's a stick. I want all the sheep to look at this, and we're going to have abundance of speckled sheep or whatever it is. It's like Jacob's like, I got your game, bro. Okay, it's cool. I want to say one thing real quick, as I do want to back up just a little bit because this was on my heart. We were talking about Esau. I want to go to Romans chapter 9. We'll start in verse 10. It says, and not only so, but also Rebekah had conceived children by one man, our forefather Isaac, though they were not yet born and had done nothing either good or bad, in order that God's purpose of election might continue, not because of the works, but because of him who calls. She was told, the older will serve the younger, as it is written, Jacob I loved, and Esau I hated. What shall we say then? Is there injustice on God's part? By no means. For he says to Moses, I will have mercy on whom I have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I have compassion. So then it depends not on human will or exertion, but on God who has mercy. For the scripture says to Pharaoh, for this very purpose I have raised you up, that I might show my power in you, and that my name might be proclaimed in all the earth. So then he has mercy on whomever he wills, and he hardens whoever he wills. So anyway, I think that wraps it up right there. The whole story with Esau, it wasn't necessarily who he was raised around or what he was doing. The first thing I thought of was Rebekah was told from the very beginning, you have two nations wrestling inside of you. And that the older will serve the younger. And so for the purpose of God being glorified, unfortunately for Esau, this is going to play out the way the Father's going to have it played out. And so that for me, when I go back to Romans chapter 9, it kind of explains that and kind of wraps that up real nice and neatly for us, I think. So
Joe, do you think that Esau had the opportunity to repent?
Yes.
Okay. So you're not going full Calvinist, are you?
No.
Okay. So this is not predestination.
We actually talked about this in when we did chapter 37 here recently about that. I think that when when Isaac is speaking to both his boys and he's talking about getting rid of the idols and doing the right thing, basically, in my opinion, this was the wink, wink, Jacob, you're cool. This is more for your brother, but because I'll keep it even across the board. If you do well, you will be blessed. If you don't do well, you won't be blessed. And then he makes them make that whole covenant of not harming each other and, not hurting your brother.
Yeah.
And so I think there was all the opportunity in the world here for Esau to make a change. I don't think it was God put in his DNA, you're going to be bad till the day you die. I think he had the opportunity, to do the right thing. And then you see the conflict in him. I know we'll cover this later when we do those parts of the chapter together. But you do see that he has a conflict in him because his sons are like, hey, either you do this or we're going to kill you.
Yeah.
Oh, and so there's this whole dynamic going on here. And it's like he's caught in a rock in a hard place, but he still had the opportunity not to partake in that.
He did. His sons coerced him. But if I can remember right, it says something about Esau still had unforgiveness in his heart or something to that effect. I can't remember the exact wording, but he hadn't let it go with Jacob.
No, not at all.
He remembered not his covenant.
Right. So that's going to keep you hard.
Yep.
Not going to keep you. It's not going to allow your heart to soften towards your brethren. So no, I just know a lot of people use that Romans 9 passage to be like, see, look, there's no way Esau could have ever repented or ever. He was destined to be
more of an opportunity than most people have because he's like, hey, look, even though you married the wrong ladies, even though you're doing all this dumb, by the way, I still think you can do good, and here's an opportunity, and you still choose not to. So,
in addition to that, he had the opportunity to show no greater love. He had the opportunity to lay down his life for his brother.
Right at the end of his life and stand up to his children. Yeah. Yep.
But
and so
future chapters.
We'll save all those goodies for later. But no, I don't. I'm not believing he was predestined to be, to the grave, an evil person. I think he still had opportunities.
God just knew.
Yeah.
And even from the passage you read there in Romans 9, that mentions Pharaoh also.
Yep.
Pharaoh had a ton of chances to do the right thing.
Maybe 10.
Yeah. Pharaoh's like, yeah, I'll let you go. And also like, no, don't let him leave. Don't let him leave.
Yeah.
Chase him into the water.
The kids have to stay here. You can leave, but the kids have to stay. No. We're all leaving, bro.
even from the standpoint of like, he rallies the armies to go chase after the children of Israel, gets to the edge of the water, sees the massive angel of fire that comes up into the back of the camp between him and Pharaoh's army. Like that moment right there, he could have just looked at his commanders and been like, okay, we're going to let him go.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like he would have been justified.
YOLO.
In the sight of all his people, and if all this, he would have been justified to be like, all right, clearly their God's working for them. We believe in the power of the gods. So let's do the smart thing. Let's go back and rebuild our economy and our nation. But instead, he continued in his craziness. So got them all killed.
Yep.
All right. Well, let's get into 29 a little bit. We are working on an hour here, and we've
That's why this has to be 4 parts now, ladies and gentlemen.
Good gracious, there is a lot of meat in these chapters, man. Golly. All right.
And
so
this one's all about we got the giants in this one and everything. Like, this one is fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So I'm going to take us to, I'm going to kind of skip over a little bit and go to verse 7. Wanted to see what you guys thought about this. Laban that day, Jacob swore to Laban that day, and Laban also to Jacob, that neither should cross the mountain of Gilead to the other with evil purpose. I was just curious what your thoughts were, specifically Sean, but if anybody has any additional thoughts on this regarding that covenant. Like, I think this is a covenant that still stands to this day, personally, and just what your thoughts are on that in modern times.
In modern times,
yeah. Like, how does does this apply in modern times, and if so, who does this apply to? Kind of deal. And then, of course, it gets into the Rephaim and all that down here in verse 9. So, anyway,
yeah, I don't know, because I don't know where Mount Gilead is in ancient Israel. So I don't think, because even in the days of Solomon, he had much larger empire throughout all the way up to Dan on the border of Syria and Assyria. So I'm not sure if anyone is still abiding by this at all. I think the in the text where it says that neither should cross the mountain of Gilead to the other with evil purpose. I think that's the qualifier.
Right.
Is that
evil purpose.
You can still cross, but as long as you're not coming to attack each other, it's just heartbreaking for me that here's Jacob just in another weird pact he's having to make with a family member to not kill him.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, bro, like, what is going on with this family? It's supposed to be righteous, but like, they're just trying to kill him. And to me, this just is another huge example of how the unclean spirits are at work. Like, I've never had to make a pact with any of my family members that they wouldn't kill me. Like, here he is doing this with his father-in-law and his brother.
Right.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and I think that's why God shows up in such a mighty way for Jacob. Whenever he's on the way up, he gets the vision of the ladder, and he's like, okay, this is like real. And, I know that God's real. I know that God's real. Okay, I know that God's real. And so he kind of doesn't have a choice but to say, I'm going to keep following this path, and I'm not going to depart from it, because so far this has been the only real thing in my life. This has been the only like actual tangible thing, is when I follow God in his ways. Even whenever he was headed up to go see Laban, he's like, I wouldn't have made it if it wasn't for God. You know how long this trip was? Like, God had to help me to get there. And then the whole time it's, okay, what do you want me to do? How do you want me to do it? And then here in verse 2, it says, and Jacob saw that Laban was going to shear the sheep. And then in verse 3, then he's talking to the wives. He told them how he had seen everything in a dream. So God's showing up again and saying, hey, you did what you were supposed to do. And I'm going to show up and show you that I still care, that I'm still involved directly in your life. And the story that I told your grandmom, your grandpa, your mom, your dad, so far, I haven't left you or forsaked you, just like I promised. So watch how this plays out. Let me show you how this works. And so Jacob's getting a direct input from the father into his life. And so, yeah, whenever he's getting these different covenants and when he's having to go through these different pacts of, okay, don't kill me, you don't cross this, I don't do that. He's like, this was all spirit-led. This was all the Father's doing of the when, the where, and the how. And I think that's one of the most impressive things about Jacob is he's not going off on his own emotions. He's not going off of feelings or, well, conventional wisdom says when there's more of you and less of me, then I should run away. It was God did it. So I'm just going to follow that and see how it works. And I'm pretty sure it's going to be to my own benefit and a blessing.
Amen.
That's a good thought. Definitely a good thought. So apparently, it seems to, this gives me vibes. Verse 1 and 2 gives me vibes of Reuben, Judah, when he in Genesis 38 when he goes to Tamar. Tamar knows he's going to go shear his sheep in a distant town, and so she then goes to that town, disguise herself. So it's interesting. It's like they had regional locations where you would take your sheep to get sheared, as opposed to just doing it on the land, where they are. Interesting. It's almost like there was like a, we go to the barber. Well, there's a specific spot they would take to get the sheep sheared.
Well, yeah, they probably had a spot for that because that was the area where they or somebody that they had set up would use that to make wool or
just go ahead and sell the product immediately right there at the market.
Why not?
Yeah.
Sell it the way it is, or clean it and turn it into, clothing of some kind, or so. I don't know. Maybe that makes sense.
The sheep literally carried it on their back,
right? As opposed to like shearing it, then having to go put it on a cart and take it somewhere. Yeah, just let them take it up there for you. It's interesting, but that means that's a long drive. Now you're driving the sheep to a 3 days journey. So it's interesting that there's all kinds of logistics that go through my mind as far as like, all right, what about marauders? What about thieves? What about what they must have had like certain passageways. They knew that here's where the sheep will be coming in through these areas. And, like it's just interesting. To me, when you're taking large flocks on a 3 days journey, that there's like an element of danger there, so just as far as protecting your flock. And, but I guess it was worth it to them to take them up to this place and shear them and then sell it off, and you come back with some dough. But it's interesting because Reuben had to do the same thing, and then he would get into trouble when he went to that city, or at least he did in that moment of Tamar.
Judah.
Yeah, Judah. Excuse me, Judah. Yeah.
I mean, maybe they were all like David and they weren't worried about it. They're like lions, bears. It doesn't matter. I'm handling that situation. These are my sheep. True. You got to go.
True.
Yeah, it's interesting.
So I like looking at numbers and different things like that when it comes to, I love studying about giants and all this. So just out of curiosity, I was looking this up again. And so when it goes into verse 9, and it says at the very end there, it says that the giant whose height was 10, 9, and down to 7 cubits. So 7 cubits, depending on your cubic, would roughly be about a 10.5 foot tall person that would weigh about 1,200 pounds. Up to a 15-foot person, which is the 10 cubics, and that would be someone who would weigh in around, it would be 15 feet tall, and they would weigh in around roughly 2,800 pounds.
And that's just based off of an average build. Like these were probably very muscular and probably
This is a proportioned person that's 15 foot tall would averagely weigh around 2,800 pounds. So when we go back to to a car, when we go back to the story of the spies who went out on the land and said, hey, they're of extraordinary size. This isn't someone with gigantism that's just kind of growing lanky and really long arms and can barely move. This is a proportional human being. Now that's at 15 foot. The cedars of Lebanon were supposedly around 20 foot up to 30 foot tall people. So you're just imagine 3,000, 4,000 pound human beings, and imagine the amount of food
plus
to keep that heart beating every day, the amount of calories. So when they said that the giants would consume the land, they literally are consuming the land just to keep their heart beating, their blood, flowing through their body, all that stuff. So you can imagine, let's say a 10.5 foot person at 1,200 pounds, that's about roughly Goliath size. Anywhere from 9 to 12 foot tall, depending on your cubic. Somebody will say this is the cubic here from your wrist to your elbow. But so when we hear the story and it says that all of Israel was on the other side, basically that we're not coming out, we're not fighting this guy. You can understand when you see when you see the weight of his armor. I think the head of his spear weighed 95 pounds.
How much did you say? 95
I think
pounds?
it's about 95 pounds or something or maybe it was lighter than that. I can't remember. I know some part of his armor weighed like 100. And when I went back and looked up the numbers, like 135 pounds was his breastplate. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, yeah, you can imagine why. I'm not going there fighting that guy. Are you kidding me? He's not some guy who's got asthma, can barely walk around, and he's ready to rock and roll.
Yeah.
So the whole point of David going out there is, rock and roll. There you go. The roll that rocked his head. But so you can imagine how
David was ready to rock.
Oh yeah,
That's right.
but you can imagine how much God was glorified in that day, because like we were talking about before, Kyle, he goes out there talking smack back to him. He's like, hey, this is an uncircumcised Philistine out here.
Right.
Regardless, the man's almost 12 foot tall and as big as a house. He's like, the day the victory belongs to our God. You know, can you imagine everyone out there, they're taking the bets on the sideline and got the dollar bills out? They're all like, you know, can you imagine what the booking on this would be in Las Vegas? The odds. So everyone who bet, even if it was a little bit of money, a little bit of shekel on David, they walked around. They were rich after that. But anyway, I digress. But anyway, I just want to go back to when it's breaking these down in chapter 29. That these are big guys. These are big people. They're not small by any ways of the imagination.
Right. I agree with you. That's why I think what you see in Numbers 13, where it talks about they brought back the fruit as well. They talked about the big fruit that was being grown also. That's going to obviously be to facilitate the big giants. And to me, if you have during the days of Abraham, you have Yahweh explaining that, I'm going to after people go into this land and then go down to Egypt and there's suffer oppression after 400 years, I'll bring you guys out because the sin of the Amorites is not yet full. So I think that this kind of stuff, not just the giants, but genetically modifying the food to feed the giants, is already happening during the days of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, because it's just the natural consequence of how do we keep these big guys alive. And I don't think they had entire armies of them. So like the ancient Greeks have writings and stories about Achilles and Ajax. Right. Supposedly Ajax was 15 feet tall according to modern standards. And that means that's in Kittim, which ancient Greece. So like that, they're having to feed him over there. And it would make a lot more sense if there was like amongst the population, maybe 3 or 4 dozen of them, because they just can't sustain too much more, So,
right, whenever they asked for a 3-piece, it was like 3 cows.
Right, right.
No, but it's funny,
but the Philistines Philistines are an amalgamation of nations, but from Gath comes the 5 brothers, of which Goliath was one of the 5.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I believe his other brother, Ishnabinabab or whatever, gets killed later in 2 Samuel 23. So
that's a fun name.
Yeah,
Ishnabinabab.
Yeah. I know we haven't got there yet in our section, but we just did. We've been kind of working on some stuff in the latter chapters of 30, and the team was brought up. There's another battle that takes place later on, and there was various group that sent 1,000 men, 1,000 men, 1,000 men, 1,000 men. So there's these 4 nations that sent 1,000 men each, but the team, they did not. They sent. We didn't even get a number from them, but it was the way it was expressed that it was a much smaller number of men, but this was mighty men.
Mighty men, yeah.
This was these were the big boys. It's like the guys in Katim was like, you know what? We don't need to send 1,000. We'll send out these 2 or 3 big boys, and that'll count for our 1,000. Mm-hmm. So, and that makes you think about the gods of ancient Greece and so on and so forth. Like this is just a continuation of these things going on throughout history. Mm-hmm. So I did want to bring up too, right after the part where it breaks down their size in verse 10, it talks about, and their habitations was from the various lands. It gives the names of the lands. Mm-hmm. And then in 11, it says, let me pull it up. It says, and Yahuwah destroyed them because of the evil of their deeds, for they were very malignant. And the Amorites dwelt in their stead, wicked and sinful, and there is no people today which hath wrought to the full all their sins. And they have no longer length of life on the earth. So is this total wipeout? Is this they don't have long lives anymore? They're not able to get as big? What's your take on that particular section in verse 11?
I think God's just realizing, like, because they're very malignant, it's time to step in.
Okay.
Because if the ways of Babylon is intended to be malignant, to influence you, to corrupt you in all ways, so that you end up self-deleting, whether it's through famine or through warfare. So I think that this is where the Father's like, he knows this could be a statement that people would call an anachronistic statement. So you would have to say, who's writing this? It's Moses. Okay. So then to the people in this day, to this day, well, this is where the Amorites were getting their judgment during the days of Moses, because this was the prophecy that the Father was going to take the children of Israelite and take them into the land, for the sin of the Amorites is not yet full, but in the days that he takes them in the land that is full, and they're going to drive them out of the land and get their judgment. So I think that it's the Father acknowledging their sin grew as a descriptor. Their sin is malignant because they're doing all these ancient ways of these Babylonian ways of corrupting the peoples and nations through trade, through covetousness, through idolatry and everything that goes along with that. And the Father's like, all right, it's time to take them out.
Yeah, and I know with you've had a contention with some other people, or this one in particular. I don't remember his name, but this one guy, I guess he's an atheist. I was trying to understand. I was listening to one of your videos. I was headed downtown Charleston. I was listening to a video of yours recently where it looked like you were part of a discussion with a group of other guys, and this one guy kept questioning you about God wiping out the women and the children, everybody. And you did a great job explaining it to him, but it felt like he kept he wanted to pin you down to saying, what was that?
His name is Pine Creek. He's an atheist. He's a former Christian / Calvinist, come from a Mennonite background, who's now an atheist.
Wow.
And so he has a YouTube channel where he tries to play gotcha with Christians on theology and try to make God look like a bad guy and stuff. He actually interviewed me 4 years ago on his channel because he heard me talking about the firmament, and he thought it was fascinating to find a Christian who actually took the scriptures for what they say. And so he interviewed me, and I ended up telling him not a lot more than just about the firmament, but also many things in my life that, he then tried to, in some cases, make mockery of, and then other cases I didn't let him. So I just kept moving on. And he's a unique character. He's a very intelligent atheist. And on that particular call-in show that I was on that you were hearing, the two other guys that were on the show, they had no clue about Pine Creek. And I was actually saving them from his incredibly trapping line of questioning, because this is why I said because the other two Christians on the panel kept trying to say, whoa, this is the worst way to talk to an atheist. I'm like, no, it's not. They need to know the actual details of the Bible. Like I'm not going to play their game and pat them on the back and fan them a little bit and make them all feel nice and cushy that, oh, let me tell you about the love of God. This guy, for a channel, for a living, creates scenarios and questions to trap Christians into demoralizing the God of the Bible. And it's based off of the lack of details. All of his questions are out of context questions based off lack of details. This is how we can get away with it. And if the average Christian doesn't actually know the Old Testament well enough, then they fall right into this trap. Yep. So this is why you may have heard the kind of the contention there in that discussion, where I'm having to quickly jump in and be like, actually, hang on, let's go to the details of what you're claiming, because you're just doing a blanket generalization and claim, but now let's actually dig into the details of the story, and you'll realize that God's justified. There's reasons they were killing giants, as we're reading in this passage here, in Jubilees 29. These people weren't just existing, trying to just be on their own, and no, they were malignant. They were trafficking people. They're burning kids in ovens. They're causing warfare. They're eating people. They're cannibalistic. Like these, you're trying to, and this is where, as you saw that weird interaction, I had these other two Christians on the panel actually trying to buff it against me, because they didn't want me actually going into the raw, gritty details of how this guy was forming his questions badly.
Yeah, and then he was just reaching really hard too, because he mentioned something about, so if my dog does something, I might have killed my dog or something like that. I was like, you have no leg to stand on here. And then he didn't want to hear what you had to say either about, this isn't just like you just said. It's not these weren't just people that were just trying to get by, living everyday life, wasn't bothering nobody, and the God of the universe just looked down and went, I'm gonna kill y'all, all of you. You dead. Women, children, the cattle. And when you try to explain to him about the manipulation of the animals, you want to, oh no, don't bring any facts into the situation. I just want to know, Sean, is it okay for all of them to die, even the children who haven't committed any sin? Is it okay for? And you're like, I'm trying to. Multiple times you kept saying, I'm trying to explain to you, but he kept cutting you off the whole time you're trying to explain it. But he didn't really want to hear. He didn't want to hear the truth anyway. So,
well, that was just round 2. That's why when I jumped on there, I said, "Hey, Pine Creek, how you doing, man? It's good. Long time no see." Because that was just round 2 of our initial interaction, where he kept trying to bring up the flood of Noah and saying, why couldn't God just kill all these people nicely? Why did he have to drown them? Why did he have to drown all the babies? I'm like, show me where the text says there was babies alive during the flood, for one, because we're talking about the whole world being full of violence and evil. So they're engaged in mass warfare, the practices that they were doing, which is the same stuff after the flood amongst the Amorites, right? It's the same type of malignant behavior taught by the Watchers. And so like he didn't want to hear it then either, Joe. He was just trying to be dismissive and create another gotcha question. So
yeah,
that's just his game.
Sorry, I didn't mean to take us on that trail. I just when I saw that in here, I was like,
perfectly fitting to the verse. No, it's 100% fitting, because this is what most modern antagonists of Scripture will do. They ignore verses like Kyle just put on screen, and they don't want to believe that the people who receive judgment in the Bible are actually deemed worthy of judgment because of their bad behavior. And even Christians struggle with this concept, because they think it's like the ultimate apologetics to try to figure out how to explain the conquest of Canaan. No, it's not. It's simple. There were murdering, thieving, trafficking Bedouins. Kill them. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not hard. God said, kill them. This is all the crap they're doing. Kill them. And then for Christians, we should gleefully come to those texts and be like, oh, this is easy to explain. Let me just show you the United Nations. Let me just show you 800,000 kids going missing in the United States today. Let me just show you, like, this should be super easy for Christians to do apologetics with. It should not be this dreaded question that they don't want to encounter. But this is how little people read their Old Testament.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. What else we got in 29?
Yeah. So what I see is that whenever he finally crosses back over and he gets sort of kind of reunited with his brother, Esau's already kind of got his nose in the air. Oh, still intense, huh? Okay. We got houses.
In life, are you?
Huh. You still traveling? Okay. You haven't put your roots down anywhere? Neat. But then, immediately what you see is in 15, it says, and he sent to his father Isaac all of his substance, clothing and food and meat and drink and milk and butter and cheese and some of dates of the valley. So he's like, hey, Dad, by the way, I want you to know that crazy mission you sent me on, even though, you wait till I tell you the details. It was successful. And let me kind of show you a little bit. Let me bring you some of the fruits of my labor. Because Jacob's like, literally, it was my labor. I went in there and did all that. And it was the Lord was on my side, and I want to recognize your part in the story and you raising me and giving me the blessing and the covenant and all that kind of stuff. But he didn't just bring them, like some of those stories, with David is like, hey, wrap up a couple pieces of bread and a fish or two, and see if that's enough. He's like, man, he's bringing all kind of, you really have to be winning if you're traveling and you've got milk and cheese and butter. These are perishable items. These aren't like a loaf of bread that can last a little while, or some things of water. He's bringing him a lot of stuff, and so it's really showing how blessed he really is and how much God has touched his heart and put in his life blessings. And he says, okay, I'm not going to just hoard all this for myself like my brother, or I'm not going to steal from mom and dad. If anything, I'm going to come and bless you guys. I'm going to give more than I receive. And I see you guys back here in regular land. I just came from awesome land with 4 wives, 12 kids, and a gazillion of everything. Hey, let's take care of mom and dad. And that really shows part of his heart. And I think these are the stories that I really enjoy, is whenever you can see the biblical characters, their models of, hey, this is me actually walking this out. This is me actually living what I'm preaching. So when we go back and we say, hey, these guys are awesome, well, they can truly be awesome. We can show you some fruit of their labors.
Yeah,
absolutely. And this was also after Laban changed his wages 10 times too, and he's still this blessed. So,
yeah, I mean, this is honoring your father and mother for sure. This is Jacob doing the commandments, Yep. And I like verse 16, to his mother Rebekah, also 4 times a year between the times of the months, between plowing and reaping, between autumn and rain, and to the tower. He would send this to the Tower of Abraham, right? So it's very interesting that, well, I just want to know what this tower is.
We talked about it.
We even said in the video, I'm like, all right, I want to talk to Sean and find out what his take is on this tower. What is this tower?
I mean, I'm getting like complete medieval vibes with all this stuff. You know, these fortified cities, living in towers. Like, what are we talking about? I mean, it's almost as if what we see in movies and pictures, you know, history from medieval battles and lands and serfs and kingdoms. It's like that was what was happening since after the flood.
Is it a castle?
Well,
That's
they have a gate. Remember, I mean, in future chapters, we see, Jacob closing the gate.
I think it was more one of these.
Maybe one of these. Maybe one of these. Was there a remote? You know, I don't know. Was there a remote? I don't know.
all we know is between the giants and the tower, we have a good Lord of the Rings, story going on here already.
Yeah.
There's nothing new under the sun. Where do you think they get half the stuff they get?
Oh yeah,
the Tower of Sauron.
yes,
Yeah, Tower of Abraham. So and of course, like we're going to see later, whatever this tower was, it did have some sort of courtyard gates around it. Or in it or on it somehow, right? And Abraham wasn't in a position to just start raining down arrows at Esau from the tower. He comes out to talk with Esau on the ground. So it's like, how tall is this thing? Who built it? What's going on here? Like, it's just interesting. Was it initially built for giants, but then Abraham took it over? You know, like there's so many questions about this tower.
Have you looked at any of the rabbinic articles on this?
No, it's the same thing about
Tell about it, Jonathan.
Well, they get quite a bit fanciful pretty quick, and it's like magic rocks, and the tower was so tall it blotted out the sun, and you get a lot of interesting.
Did it have an elevator in it?
Yeah,
probably.
Apparently, there's a guy at the bottom doing this the whole time.
Yeah, they had a giant for hire. He was like, "This is all I do all day."
Yeah. His job was to hold the door.
Just a big giant in the basement on a big treadmill.
Yeah.
Pulling the elevator inside the tower all day. Like it's interesting.
But I thought it was interesting you brought up in 16 because, there's that model that's built into there. And it's, I definitely don't need us to go into a whole calendar debate conversation, but, it seems like that fits one of the calendars very specifically, like almost 100%. No real deviation or variation. Just this only fits one way for one reason, and it's perfectly. And it shows that it's an important. It wasn't just this is just one of those throwaway days. It's one of those in between days. It was like this was a day to do something good. This was a day to take care of mom and dad. This was something that was important enough for me to remember it and to do something on it, not just okay, it's Tuesday, whatever, no big deal.
Yeah, it's those new moons. It's like it's almost its own harvest day. It's almost or maybe I should say Jacob is using these new moons as if it's a day to give of your excess to those in need, to the poor, right? The Deuteronomy 15 application, because Esau had left his parents stranded without, so here's Jacob coming along. And I'm guessing Isaac's old enough with his eye issue, he can't really do farming. So puts Rebecca in a bad position. So here comes Jacob to the rescue every quarter. I got lots of more food. Mom and Dad, here you go.
Yep. And we got to take into consideration, too, all of these people that are part of his community, like they have people that are in their group now that is becoming elders, that are becoming older. So we have new generations taking care of the older people amongst that group as well. So it's not just, it's not just them two up in a tower and they're the only old ones there. Like there's an entire community of generations going on here. So
yeah, it's a lot going on. And where did those people go in history? Right.
Yeah.
So like we see Ishmael or Esau marries an Ishmaelite woman. And you're sitting there going, okay, so that means the Ishmaelites are going off and they're off doing their thing, becoming 12 great nations or 12 great princes or whatever.
Yeah, the princes.
Or they're thriving, of which we see Job in that lot, as a descendant of Esau later on. But Job marries an Ishmaelite Arabian woman. So it's interesting to see like these tie-in of all these other, again, like I think I may have mentioned this last time we talked, but there's just so many other details happening all around the story of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that not just with the bad guys, but with other good people. It's not like Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and these families was the only good people on the earth. Clearly, the Melchizedek is still running around, right? And that the priests that were with him being trained up, which they had families, they had offspring, they're multiplying. Unless there's some war we don't know about. Not everyone in Salem got wiped out, but there's just other good people out there. You know what I mean? Abimelech in the days of Abraham, trying to do what's right, to the point where he's lets Abraham go, gives him a huge honor and a blessing as a prophet. Went on his way. So what happened with him and his family and all the people that under his authority as the king of Egypt at the time? So like it's interesting just to see this dichotomy play out. Like the more you dig into these books, this is why it's a travesty that Jubilees is not in American Bibles, because you start to see not only just all these surrounding details of the world they were in, but you also see that Jacob is not just the hill grabber. Exactly. He was actually a righteous man. He deserves the accolades we see spoken of him in Deuteronomy.
Absolutely.
Included with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob.
Yeah, we even see that from his own parents. It's like, I think that's one of the goals of children is, to have that approval, and like so often, it's the job of the child to do what's right. It's the parent's job to raise you in the ways you should go and to, prepare you for life that's coming. But ultimately it's the job of that child to follow that, and to be that example and to follow after the ways of the parents. So in 20, it goes and say it, his father and mother from time to time, all they needed, and they blessed Jacob with all their heart and with all their soul. They literally were like, man, you are A+, super A+, hugs and kisses, come around more often, another A+, and you're the best. And I think that's going to speak huge volumes, for us. We're trying to go back and retrospectively read into the story and, well, what was Jacob? And was he the heel grabber? Was he the conniver? Did he cheat? Did he tape, hair to his arm? And you're like, his parents said, way to go, dude. You literally are awesome. And to hear that from your own parents, that's got to be something that we can take and say, okay, on the witness of 2 or 3, Jacob was a good dude. Jacob, like you said, he deserves what he gets spoken about, and he gets to be in the list of the patriarchs forever because of things like that.
Yeah, I agree with that, because when we look at the canon, when we've been through Torah, or myself, I speak for myself, I've been through about 9 years of Torah portions before I became to this knowledge of reading about Jacob. I mean, when you read the story in the canonized version of this, that's what you get. You get heel grabber, you get deceiver, you get, you don't get the full story of who he is. And his mother, awesome mom, by the way, is just speaking blessings and talks about his righteousness, and, gives him the mom advice earlier where she's like, hey, make sure you do this and you do this. And he said, Mom, don't worry about it. I've been keeping all this, Mom, I've been doing this. And this is where we come to realize, Kyle, we were talking about, and Jonathan, in one of our episodes, that when he's going out to get a wife, isn't he like 60 years old?
63.
Yeah, 63 years old. He's like, Mom, if I've held out for 63 years, we're good.
Right. Until he saw Rachel.
What's that?
Say until he saw Rachel.
Right.
He was like 7 years, whatever.
Got to have Rachel.
She had them good eyes.
So I've been waiting 63 years. That's the woman I want right there.
Good
How long
stuff.
did Jacob actually live? 110?
Oh, that's a good question.
It was one.
I thought it was a little bit older than that.
117? What he died? I think it gives us his date of death in Genesis, right?
147.
147.
Yeah.
That sounds right.
Yeah.
So 63, he's not even half life. I mean, that's an equivalent to being like late 30s, early 40s.
Yeah.
To us. So I guess Rachel possibly could have been attracted to him. Possibly. We don't know how Leah and Rachel are either, hopefully they're not
definitely
like
younger. I believe they're a lot younger, but yeah.
Well, their genes were probably a little better. They probably didn't wrinkle quite as quickly as we do. And, so.
And that's the interesting part, because we talk about the corruption of the land, the giants, which is corrupting the genome, and everything involved there. So it's like, it's still considered a land flowing with milk and honey by the days we get to Moses, and then pulling the children out of Egypt. And so it's like, it makes you just wonder if there was it's almost as if the corruption of the land was just simply that they were destroying it because of they're eating it too much. There's possible deforestation happening, I guess. because it seems as if that whole area was still a forest during these days from other places in Scripture. And then, but it's not like today where like the County of Los Angeles, the sewage water has tons of pharmaceuticals in it from people taking pharmaceuticals, and then their urine has it in it that expels from their body. And now, you know, if you want free Quaaludes, just go drink the sewage water in LA, right? Like you just get your whatever depression medicine free. So like that, not recommended. Right. So that's like
all city water.
That's like truly corrupting the land. But here we have these water sources in Israel. So in this region anyway, and just makes you wonder if any of that, clearly it wasn't that type of degradation of the land itself to the point where they couldn't drink the water, they couldn't have the sheep come up to the brook, and you know, there wasn't. So it's interesting to see. It makes you wonder if the Amorites were, and all the other clans in that area that are listed off in Genesis 15, the Avim, the Hittites, all those guys. It makes you wonder if they were just doing their warfare outwardly, and this was like the area that they were not doing it in as much. If I could put it like that, because they had a confederation with each other. I don't know, just some thoughts that come to mind. Because clearly Egypt is on the other side of the Nile, so that won't exactly affect the land there. But I just think about how warfare corrupts the land so badly, can create barrenness, can create, you know, problems with the water systems and everything, from literally just the animals and the people's blood flowing into the rivers for all the battle zones, and the fish dying, that kind of stuff. And so it just makes me wonder, because I'm just going to reference this. I don't think this is scripture, but it's an interesting perspective from history that you do have in Antiquity of the Jews. You have Josephus talking about this time period, and he says that the inhabitants of Canaan, they fortified all the cities because they knew the children of Israel were coming back. They knew the prophecy, and they were trying to be ready for them when they did come back. So you can't destroy the land around you and have a prosperous society so that you have the resources, the means to have a good army, to have produce, you know, your smelting of your iron, your collection of your iron ore, the building of weapons, chariots, fortifying your walls and your cities. You can't do all that if the land around you is destroyed. So by absolute necessity of their own deviousness, they had to protect the land.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting thought, because it's like, you would think that they would just want to destroy that land, so there's nothing for the children of Israel to come back and inhabit. But they didn't. They actually, it seems as if they directed all their war efforts and all their corruption outwardly around that zone, which is like super ironic to me. It's just that they would like, they're actually just gardening the land and getting it prepared to be handed over to the children of Israel at the appointed time. In vain, right? The wealth of the wicked is stored up for the righteous.
Yeah, they were playing tag, and that was base.
Yeah, yeah. Because you remember what it says when in Exodus, I think it's 13, when Yahweh was bringing them out with the angel out of Egypt, and he says he didn't want to take them along the sea because they would be scared from warfare. So he took them this other route, because the Canaanites and the Hittites and the Amorites. I mean, it was like, we see even in the First Samuel, right? With the famous statement that it was the springtime when the kings go to war, but David stayed at home. So like it was a common practice every year. Like, it's springtime, guys.
Right. It's about that time.
Get the new recruits. See which ones. See who's too old, can't strap up, and we're gonna take the armies that we're gonna mobilize and go fight somebody.
Yeah.
Everybody's bored through the winter anyway. They're like, we got to get out of this castle. We got to do something.
Yeah, it's like they put everything on pause for the winter, unless you're Napoleon, and then you're like, okay, well, we're just gonna go out and continue fighting or fight a new fight. This year it's springtime, so we got to go out to war. Like, that's crazy mentality to me, man. That is just crazy. But that's the reality of their life, and clearly they didn't do, at least at this point in Jacob's life and Isaac's life. They weren't doing that. Apparently they did that with Abraham, right? In Genesis 14, the battle of the 9 kings.
Yep.
And that only was, it's almost as if I don't know where the initial battle started, but clearly the king of Sodom got drawn into that battle, and we know he was in the Levant, near where Abraham was, up on the hillside.
Yep.
So, and then when Abraham chased down Kedorlaomer, chased him all the way up to Dan. So, like, that's through the middle swath of Israel, basically, of the promised land. So, I don't know. I'm sorry to rant. There's all these details that come to mind that I would love to just, because I love history and they all fit together. These are all things I think that rarely get talked about, is just this unique concept of the Amorites and these clans that Genesis 15, Yahweh promises Abraham, I'm going to expel these from the land because they're sinful. And then we see those sinful acts detailed for us in Leviticus 18 through 20 and Deuteronomy 23 and all these other places. And you're like, Abraham's doing righteousness, and he comes in specifically to cater to this land because Yahweh over and over and over says, you know what, this little area, this is my land. And it's interesting that the Father keeps continually saying, you know what, this is mine. Like, clearly the entire earth, all of creation is his, right? But he wants to put like this special focus on this particular area. And now I'm not a Zionist by any means, but I just think that it's interesting that this the enemy also knows that it's his land and constantly wants to inhabit it and corrupt it, and from that local point be a malignant force to everything outside of it. You know what I'm saying? I guess I apologize it took so long to get to that, but that's what's going on in my head, right? Whereas the Garden of Eden was supposed to be a place of righteousness, and everything outside of that was going to be blessed by the Lord. Now the enemy's like, you know what? I'm going to take over this land, and everything outside of it, I'm going to corrupt and kill. It's just,
when we're told to be the complete opposite, we're, be the city on a hill, and the light and draw men to ourselves, So it's like, God's plan is to bring everybody here, and the enemy's plan is like, well, let's get rid of everybody from here. And I think, even God, in his infinite wisdom, past, present, future, is like, hey, one day I'm gonna send my son, the Messiah, and he's gonna come to this land, so it can't be gone and done away with. It definitely has to still be preserved. He has to have somewhere to show up to. There still has to be even a semblance. It's not gonna be right, and nothing's gonna be good, but I still gotta have a semblance of a temple there. So at least there's something to be spoken to. If it was just all nothing but one tent in the whole, it wouldn't make any sense. No one would be there. Yeshua would have nobody to talk to. No one would be saved and corrected. It would just be, oh, okay, well, here he came and there he went. But instead it was, temple's still here. There's no ark, nothing proper going on. But that's a talking point for my son to correct some things. And then as soon as he's done, a couple years later, go and get rid of it because I don't need it anymore. Clearly the message is the same, but the plan has changed. So let's make it happen.
It's fascinating to me. And this is little stuff like that is why I can never be on board with the whole determinism idea of philosophy, that God's to create every single action, good and bad, and that you can't deviate from it. You know what I'm saying? It's like, there's no reason for him to have all these sticky details he's constantly working with throughout time, and then,
Jonah.
and with the constant call for people to repent, obviously, which literally means they can change their outcome. But just the Father's constantly working with all these sticky details, and you're just like, that's not that to me, unless you just have a deterministic God who just wants to complicate things for no reason. That's way too many sticky details of complication that he could have smoothed out along the way or way previously, in eternity past, to create all this stuff. So it just blows my mind how people think that God determined all these actions ahead of time. Even the devil himself, they'll say, well, the devil is just a proxy of what the Father already determined. So you're essentially meaning the devil is just literally doing what the Father's already decided to do. Therefore, you're ascribing evil to the Father. Like, the whole thing is just a nasty philosophical thought process. But all these details you're talking about, Jonathan, and what I was mentioning, all that kind of stuff, everything we're reading about here that we don't get in the regular canon, it just all lets you know that the Father is working through all these details. To me, this ascribes more glory to him, is that he can take all these failures from even his own people, and especially from those who are not his people, they can still work things together for the good of those who love him.
Amen.
That's a super powerful God, in my opinion. We should probably get to the last chapter.
Yeah.
The last chapter's got a lot, I think, in there also. So it's,
And 30.
this is the chapter where we get Dinah and the whole situation with Shechem and the misdealings and incorrect events that go on from all parties involved. Obviously it sounds as though Dinah was a little more curious than probably need be. Shechem and his clan was not dealing with humans correctly. And then Simeon and Levi show up and there's like, hey, by the way, let's take this into our own hands. Unlike Dad, who would stop and pray, hey, what should I do before I move forward? Or how should I go about doing this? Moses praying to God, how should I handle the situation? There's like, nope, we know the thing to do, and we're going to go ahead and go for it and see how it turns out. So this story is just full of, like Joe said, it's just full of those details and so much stuff for us to learn of, here's what's wrong. Don't do that. Here's what's right. Do complete that. And then, you get to see Jacob's like kind of oversight over the whole thing. He kind of was like, what happened? But why? And then what did you do? And so then we get to see Jacob take a really more of the prominent leadership role here versus the guy in the mix. And I think that's a cool position to see Jacob in. So far he's been the one doing all the actions and he's been the one directly in the story. Now he's taken the coach role. He's taken the father role. And so it's interesting to see him in that role.
Yeah.
Yeah. I forgot to mention this in the past couple chapters, but apparently Zebulun and Dinah were born 7th day of the 7th month. They're twins.
Mm-hmm.
So Dinah's 12 years, so Zebulun's 12 here. Makes sense why he's not going to be involved in the battle.
Right.
Yeah. Apparently it only takes two of Jacob's boys to take out a whole town of Hivites.
Well, they were all a little sore, I don't think they were moving too well at the moment. I don't remember. Forgive me because I just totally blanked on this, but I don't remember the canonized version telling us her age. Does it?
It doesn't.
Okay.
No.
Yeah. So yeah, a little girl of 12 years old. So this wasn't just, they saw some pretty girl and, maybe she was a little flirty and da-da-da-da-da. No, this was all the way wrong what they were doing.
It's the first two still calling her a child.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
But again, what have I been saying about the behaviors of these clans? Like this is what they do. They traffic, traffic children.
Yep.
And even in verse 10, though, as it goes on to explain why it's so bad not to, it's so horrible to give your daughter to the seed of the Gentiles. Verse 10 says, because you've given to the seed of Molech.
Mm-hmm.
So the language in here is very different than what we see in Deuteronomy 7.
Right.
Or even in, I can't remember the exact passage in Genesis where Abraham is being encouraged not to give your children to the Gentiles, not to intermarry with the Gentiles, because it's talking about this seed concept. I know we've talked about it in the past, but it's not just speaking of just biological descendancy.
Right. It's their practices.
It's the practices of, because Molech is a false god that is being worshipped by these nations. So he doesn't have literal biological descendancy. So this, again, this is why I think these details are so important to understand what it talks about when we talk about the seed wars. We're talking about whose children are you? Of the devil because you do the deeds of the devil, or of God because you do the deeds of God? Yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And when we take a look at verse 8, it says, and let not an adulteress and no uncleanness be found in Israel throughout all the days of generations of the earth. And what's interesting about that is, it's like a quick blanket statement. But obviously, if we're good Bereans, if we're Bible scholars, people who actually read the book and understand what it's saying, there's a lot to unpack in that. It's adulterous. You're like, okay, how many times does God call Israel adulterous? Because they're whoring after false gods or going after the ways of the nations, asking for kings, doing all of the literal wrong things. And then uncleanness. There's a definition for that word. There's a whole long list of concepts and ideas and direct facts that are saying this is what's clean and this is what's unclean. Don't let that be in your camp. Don't let that be a part of this nation, because we are a holy nation, a kingdom of priests. You know, you're supposed to be the example for the world, and watch how much I bless you. I'm going to bless your socks off. Literally, I'm going to bless you so much, even when you're wrong, your shoes won't wear out. You know, even when you're wrong, I'm going to feed you and give you water every single day, because that's how much I bless my people. So don't bring the unclean here. Don't bring the adulterous stuff going on here. If you see the Baal and the Asherah and the Molech and all that, get that out of here. There's only one seat, and that's for God the Father, the Almighty. There's not a 1A, 1B, 1C. Well, you can figure it out later. You know, he's like, hey, this is how I set it up. Do it the right way, and all these things will be added to you.
Great points. 100% agree. And there's also a parallel here with first chapter we dug into 28. The Shechemites, and I apologize if I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but I just don't want to forget this thought. But the Shechemites here, you know, what happens as the story unfolds? They've kidnapped Dinah, Jacob, and the leader of the Shechemites, what's his name, Hamor. They're talking, right, about this, to where Jacob doesn't just get her back. He's just like, all right, well, I'll give her to be married to your prince. And then of course Simeon and Levi are like, oh no, right? So they're going to come in, propose this idea that all the Shechemites get circumcised. And this is an interesting, because remember we're talking about Laban calling upon what's written on the heavenly tablets in order to manipulate Jacob. But here come the Shechemites going, we can get circumcised in order to, and then, you know, we'll make this little pact with them temporarily, and we'll just take them later, right? Because as it's going to tell us, they had a habit of stealing wives.
Mm-hmm.
So they're looking at all the other women, right? Mm-hmm. So they're just going along and acting as if they're willing to be in covenant with Yahweh and Israel in order to manipulate them and to get one over on them.
It'll make it easier for them in the future for their other stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they didn't really want to be circumcised in their own hearts, so they're doing this falsely on the outside.
Right.
Yeah. By the way, you know how they always say that the obelisk is like, you know, the phallus of Osiris?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's an uncircumcised phallus, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for that imagery.
Yeah. But think about it. Like what did you guys repeat about David, right? Who is this uncircumcised Philistine?
Right.
Honoring our God. Right.
Yep.
So the symbol of defiance is uncircumcision.
Wow. Yeah.
Think about that. And then you wonder.
I'm trying not to.
Don't think about it too long, but
yeah.
but then think about why the world freaks out over circumcision.
Right.
Yeah.
It's literally the false gods, an obelisk dedicated to symbolize one of the main false gods, you know? So yeah, it's just very interesting that these guys are using this circumcision discussion and why Levi and Simeon thought, you know, like, I want to say it's clever, but at the same time, I'm like, I don't know. I feel like if God's with them, they could, especially Testament Levi claims an angel showed up and said, you need to do this anyway.
Right.
Their judgment is time. I don't know if they needed to have them circumcised to do it. Look, circumcision may hurt, but I promise you, if someone's swinging a sword at me, I'm going to get up and defend myself in pain. So I don't know how much the pain affected them. I don't know what that means. I don't know if this
we did cover this a little bit. Now, what I would say is this. I'm not sure how they circumcised these men and how much. Okay, so there could have been, that's all I'm going to say. It's like they could have been really sore, like, man, this is circumcision. This is rough. I don't know. It's like,
oh, I got you. So basically, they did, yeah.
Okay. So we don't know the exact
I don't think. Yeah, I don't think Simeon and Levi did it to all these guys, right? Like that's a.
I doubt it, but yeah, you don't know.
They probably had a group.
Of course.
Like, hey, isn't this rock supposed to be sharp when you do this? Don't worry about it. Professional, man.
Rub some of that fungus infested dirt on it, you know. And let's get them a little infection going on here too.
And I am reminded that David dropped a bag of 200 foreskins at Saul's feet.
Exactly.
So
he asked for 100, he gave him 200.
He's an overachiever.
I don't know if David had his men extract those or if he personally did it himself. So I don't know. Maybe Levi and Simeon I doubt they actually did it. I'm sure the women did it or something. But the point is, they knew, like the idea is like here they're using the things of God to try to get their way.
Well, and what's interesting is I always see that whenever we find the covenants from the Father, the two signs of the covenants, the two outward things was the marriage and the circumcision and the Sabbath, right? So it's like, what is the world always going against? Circumcision, the Sabbath, and marriage. And these were all the outward signs, the things that we can literally show the world that we're in covenant with the Father. And that's, well, what can we fight? What can we hide? What can we take away? What can we pervert? All those things, right?
Yep.
Nothing else. All the other stuff is like, oh, okay, whatever. You do this, you do that. That's fine. Your bread's unleavened this week. Sure, no big deal. Circumcision? Oh no, we're gonna get a sign and go outside of your house, your hospital, whatever, and make sure that that we are displeased with your action. And it's like these are the things we're supposed to show the world that this is a part of our sign, like not literally show the world, but take part in to show the world that we are in covenant with him. And it's like, why would those be the most controversial things in all of existence? Pretty much is you keep the Sabbath, well, now you're under the law, and it was once saved, always saved, but since you keep the law, then now you're not saved anymore, even though
you noticed that too.
Yeah, even though that would defeat the whole argument in and of itself. But
yeah,
the one unpardonable sin is keeping the things that God says. So it's just really, really interesting. In the
same irony, you've never seen a feminist woman so obsessed with the male member until circumcision comes up.
I was thinking about it when you brought up the obelisk earlier. I was thinking about it, and I'm thinking about all the monuments and everything that's been defiled over the years and paint put on them, and I can't think of this. I'm not saying it hasn't happened, but I can't think of in modern times. I can't think of a single obelisk like the Washington Monument or anything like that has had any kind of defilement. But they protect the other stuff that gets messed up. I mean, goodness gracious, Stonehenge just got messed up not too long ago.
At least the Washington Monument and St. Peter's Basilica, which is literally the Osiris obelisk from the Temple of Luxor.
Yeah,
those are, you're not getting close to those to defile them.
Well, I haven't been to the monument in DC, so I don't know how close you can or cannot get to it. I don't know.
I've been to both.
Yeah, I mean, they got security around them. You know what I'm saying?
Okay. Huh. All right. Well, I haven't heard of anybody defiling those. I just thought that was interesting. All right. Okay. Before we get too far in this, when we come out of 29, I mean, I want to go back to verse 1 in chapter 30 here. So when we come out of 29, it's talking about how they're proud of Jacob, right? And they blessed him with all their heart and soul. And then we have this story about Dinah, right? And it pretty much the entire chapter is about the situation going on with Dinah. But the very first verse, it says, in the first year of the 6th week, he went up to Salem to the east of Shechem in peace in the 4th month. Well, that's wonderful. Why? Go for
it. Melchizedek.
Yeah. Because the entire rest of the chapter is talking about Dinah's situation. So anyway, would you like to elaborate on that any?
Yeah, I mean, this is where we're told the king of Salem, the Melchizedek, the priest of the Most High God, that's where he existed. And there was and as Jubilees tells us, that it was a priesthood, not just a singular person.
Right.
So there's, and again, you can, even though Jacob's also a priest as well, we don't see, or at least we see him becoming a priest who has enabled to, we see in 3 chapters later, he's able to pass down the garments of the priesthood to Levi. We don't know exactly what's going on, other than it makes perfect sense that he would go up here in the 4th month, because that's when you would have the new moon. So if he's going to go to celebrate Yahweh in the 4th month, it makes perfect sense.
Awesome.
So it wasn't just taking care of mom and dad. He was taking care of whoever the high priest was also in charge of. So he's literally following Torah instruction.
Yeah, which is, you're bringing in your produce, and then the priests receive it. The excess gets to the widows, the orphans, the people that need it.
Which makes the act that was done to Dinah even more horrible,
right?
Because of the time of year that this happened.
And it says, "And there they carried off." So it's almost as if Shechem is kind of like. Now, granted, this is probably 100 years since Abraham went up to the Salem. So I'm still guessing that the priesthood is still there, but it doesn't mean that the whole region is righteous, clearly.
Right.
So the Hivites have now come into Shechem, and they already have a bad reputation for what they do in this area. Yeah.
Good stuff. I just thought we needed to mention that because it's just that one little verse there. So
Yeah, but it's, I mean, like, again, this is just the hard reality, the sticky details of trying to serve Yahweh. You know, he's trying to do a good thing, abide in the covenant. His daughter gets taken and R-worded.
Yeah. And I mean, and it was so bad, apparently, that, as they're going through the story in verse 11, the angel who's dictating all this down to Moses, like, all right, quick pause. Hey, Moses, by the way, I've been telling you a story this whole time. Yeah, intermission. I need to talk to you directly. Hey, command the children of Israel and don't have them marrying Gentiles. Like, and Gentiles isn't just random people out in the world. It's those who are in covenant and those who are not in covenant. There's only two options here. So he said, keep covenant, keep that process clean, because that's how this works. You start going outside of covenant, then you're outside of covenant. It should be pretty plain to you. But I love that the angel's like, all right, quick pause. Let me break the fourth wall here. This was a cool story and all, but Moses, no, right now, when we get done with this conversation, go down there and tell those people that they need to stick to the plan and do the right thing, because this is of utmost importance. And like I said, I love these little just random additions where the angel's like, by the way, real quick, noted, make sure you highlight this part. It's kind of important. All right, let's get back to the story.
It's amazing.
I have a quick question here. And we did read through this, of course. We did a whole recording on this, but I was going back through. So it doesn't say in chapter 30 that Simeon and Levi actually, it doesn't say in Jubilees, right? Did they actually circumcise them, or does it?
I don't think it says it.
It doesn't at all.
What are your thoughts? What are you thinking?
I mean, it just, because again, this is that conflict with the canon saying that they did this, and then they attacked them when they were sore and all this stuff. But I'm going back and rereading this real quick, and what I'm getting is they're being praised for what they did in chapter 30. It says that they went and executed judgment on all the men of Shechem in verse 4. So it's like, and then when you read from there on, that this is written on the heavenly tablets and all that stuff, and that anyone who tries to defile Israel and all the uncleanness and all this stuff, and not to be taken wives of the Gentiles, and or vice versa, not to be given your men unto unto these women, and or your daughters unto the Gentile. I'm sorry, the daughters of the Gentiles. But when I'm reading this, it's like when we read the canon part of it, it makes it sound like they went in and did something very horrible and bad. But when you're reading this, it says they executed judgment,
right?
And this is righteous judgment. They were justified in what they did, but nowhere in the stories it talks about that I could see as I'm rereading it. I'm going, because sometimes, both stories will blend together because both the stories. And so you're like going, wait a minute, and here it doesn't say anything about them circumcising anybody. What it actually says is they went in with the swords and just took care of business. And I don't know, I just want to get your thoughts on that, because then the rest of this, or a good portion of this, is actually, this is the reasons. This is what we're doing. It says in verse 12, it says, for this reason I have written for thee in the words of the law all the deeds of the Shechemites, which they wrought against Dinah, and how the sons of Jacob spoke, saying, we shall not give our daughter to a man who is uncircumcised, for that were a reproach unto us. And it is a reproach to Israel to give those who give, and to those who take the daughters of the Gentiles, for this is unclean and abominable in Israel, to Israel. So anyway, I was just throwing it out there for thought. Just,
does the Septuagint have that?
I don't know.
I don't remember.
Well, I think what he's saying is the entire conversation about the circumcision is missing in this passage.
Yeah. It is. It's missing here. But like you said earlier, Sean, they could have just went in there, with God behind them, and that's what it sounds like more in here of what they did. It sounds like they went in there,
and that's what's consistent in the Testament of Levi as well,
right? And so it just makes it sound like this, and this feels more justified. Where in the, like I said, I've been through a lot of Torah portions, and one of the things that people will bring out is, well, Levi and Simeon, they were using God stuff to deceive these people to go in there to kill them, basically, and how it was very wrong for them to do that. But according to this, they were justified. Not only were they justified, there's a whole law and decree made, and from henceforth and thereafter, and none of this is to come into Israel to defile Israel. And and then when you're reading this also, because it sounds like Jacob, he wasn't happy with it either. Verse 3, it says, and he besought his father and his brothers, this is Hamar, yeah, that she might be given to him as a wife. It says, and Jacob and his sons were wroth because of the men of Shechem. You don't get this kind of language as much in the canon part of it, because Jacob's kind of yelling at his boys, hey, what did you do, man? You're going to cause, strife with me and other people. And it kind of like makes Jacob almost sound like he's being passive here.
Yeah.
But here, Jacob's like, yeah, I'm mad. I'm not happy this happened whatsoever. And then when the boys go in and take care of judgment, it sounds like this is exactly what was supposed to take place. And when Sean, when you share with the Shechemites and who they are, and that they this is what they do. They go and take wives. They go and take women that's not theirs. And I'm sure they're sacrificing children unto Baal. And they're doing all these wicked and horrible things. That this was proper judgment. That when you came in and touched and defiled something that belonged to God, to Israel, this is the consequences of what you're going to get. And this fully justified in this happening.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of verse 2 there, it says they spoke deceitfully with him and they beguiled them. But that's just where traditionally people would just insert the entire conversation about circumcision.
Right.
No, that was verse 4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just, I'm sorry, verse 3 at the end of verse 3. So it's just an assumption.
3. Yeah, you're right. Sorry.
And that's where, what you're running into right here is you're running into the very unpopopular line of questioning.
Go back to that real quick, because I want to take you down a little trip in my brain. Okay.
Okay.
Well, I want to hear. I finish what you were saying there, Sean.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
The more you read Jubilees, that's 12 patriarchs, the more you see how much they align. All of the names, dates of burial, dates of death, the people and the places all match with Genesis. But the more you read Jubilees, you start to realize it's an interesting thing that first century Judaism rejected Jubilees and accepted Genesis. Then we don't have the earliest manuscripts of Genesis. They only date it back to the 2nd century BC, which doesn't mean doesn't mean that was its first date of origination. Just interesting that you see concepts like this. Like I said before, the biggest, unfortunately, you get in Genesis, Jacob saying, people ascribe this moment here to Genesis 49, and Jacob saying, I want no part in your evil deeds, speaking to Simeon and Levi. But this shows us that Jacob was angry too. He wasn't just trying to acquiesce to the Shechemites like we get from Genesis. And he did seem to know that they were setting him up. So it just makes you wonder. I don't believe that the current books we have today were letter by letter scribed by Moses. There's a lot of anachronistic problems in Genesis as far as names and dates that were added later from scribes. And that's just the reality of the text. So
that's a tough thing to say. I know that's why it took so long to get that out. That's a a hard thing to say publicly, but
that's a tough take, guys. It's about as tough as me saying Christ is truly ministering in a temple in heaven. People don't like it. So that because they think, what have we heard in our culture, United States, for so long? It's the holy, inspired, unadulterated word of God.
Mm-hmm.
No, you can just pull up the Masoretic text and start going line by line with that one and just show from the Septuagint something clearly has been changed.
Yep.
Timelines are way off.
Yep.
And Shem is not Melchizedek showing up there getting, 10% from Abraham. He's been dead. He's not even been around. So
I used to get super wrapped up in the gematria of all the hidden stuff in the text in the Hebrew. And then I learned, they had 700 years. They had 700 years to create the Masoretic. That's a long time to put in all your fun Kabbalistic gematria leanings.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's been so many adjustments even since then. I mean, people like to use the 1611 King James. Of course, we got to take out the Apocrypha, but they like to use the King James as the authority as well. But I mean, we can even go back to the Geneva Bible and see where changes were made from Geneva to King James, and then King James. There's just so much.
So thankfully, none of this stuff is salvific. These are details,
exactly
historical details, right? Doesn't change the faith at all. These are very minute details as well. They're definitely not salvific. But the more you start to study how we got our Bibles, the history of the Bibles, and really start doing a cross-reference and comparison, which is what I'm doing as I compile my study guide, I start to realize, there's some things I won't talk about a lot.
All the more reason.
Except on Anchor to Truth, we will discuss these things.
Right, whether we get banned or
all
not.
these Bibles over here.
But remember, it took me 6 years of talking about Christ being our high priest in heaven's temple before people actually understood what I was saying to get mad about it.
Right.
So one little moment on your channel may not catch on.
Yeah.
But I don't doubt that God can speak to us through his word. But there is a documented history of minute changes. Doesn't change the story, doesn't change the outcome, doesn't change the promises. But there's a documented record of minute changes from different manuscripts. And so you're just running into one of them where it seems very suspicious. Why is Jacob kind of given a bad rap in Genesis? But in Jubilees, he's like righteous, he's ready to go to war, boy's ready to fight Esau. Like he's not a pushover, he's not a beguiler in a negative way. Like he is actually kind of acting like Abraham a lot.
Yep.
So
all the more reason we need to be praying that the Father grant us wisdom and discernment, and that the Holy Spirit reveal truth to us and open our eyes, our ears, our hearts, and our minds to receive his truth when it is presented to us. Because that's the only way we're gonna get it. Because I mean, there's deception on top of deception on top of deception on top of things being hidden on top of things being hidden throughout centuries. This isn't something that happened 100 years ago to kind of deceive us. Like this has been going on since BC, before Yeshua was around. This has been going on. So yeah.
But I would love to take Enoch, Jubilees, Genesis through Deuteronomy, and put them together chronologically. I think
that would be awesome.
Be pretty fun.
That'd be a big win.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Put the little Genesis back into Genesis.
I like that. I like that idea.
All right, Joe, what were you cooking up before?
Yeah, what you got?
Well, I mean, it's probably nothing. It may be nothing, but I might be trying to reach here a little bit. But sometimes we're reading something. If we want to look at maybe at a different lens here, go up just a little bit in the 3 there, right there in 3, right in 3. It says, and he besought his fathers, again, this is, Hamor, or Hamor, however you say his name. It says, he besought his father and her brothers that she might be given to him to wife. And Jacob and his sons were wroth because of the men of Shechem, for they had defiled Dinah, their sister, and they spoke to them with evil intent and dealt deceitfully with them and beguiled them. What if this is his family speaking, trying to beguile the sons and Jacob? Where we're looking at this as Jacob trying to be, or them, the brothers beguiling them. It's like, no, they're basically, we go back and look at the definition of beguile, it's being charming. It's sweet talking also for a form of deception. It's like, this man wants her as his wife. So I'm going to go in there with my best behavior. I'm going to speak to the brothers and to, Jacob, and I'm going to do my best to convince you that she needs to be my wife. So I'm the one who's actually doing or trying to do the beguiling. But then, because then right after it says, and Simeon and Levi came unexpectedly to Shechem and execute judgment. He's like, I see what you're selling, but I'm not buying it. By the way, they don't realize this, but the 2 brothers are going to show up now and take care of business. So I don't know. I know it's a little bit of a reach, but I'm just saying, what if the way that sentence structure is should have been more or less him?
I see where you're getting at, but just following the flow of conversation. It's I can't remember what it's called, the law of lasts or something. I don't know, but the last group of people that was spoken of before, it says they, and they spake to them. Who is the they? Well, the last people that were discussed, it says, and Jacob and his sons were wroth because of the men of Shechem, for they had defiled Dinah, their meaning Jacob and sons, sister, and they spake to them. So going by law of last or whatever, the last one mentioned that was the there. What's the there for?
Here's my problem with that though. And dealt deceitfully. They were never told anywhere after 4 that any of this was done deceitfully or wrong. I don't know. I just, I don't know. What do you think, Sean?
No, I see where you're going. I see why you would think this, because it tells us later in the chapter that the Shechemites were doing this deceitfully because they had their eyes on, they had a history of taking wives, and they weren't intending to uphold this covenant they were making with them. So we understand that. I guess I kind of, because of what Genesis says, is the only reason I would lean towards the law of lasts in this, right? Which is that Jacob and his sons were figuring out a way, because it's like, and look, I mean, this is, take it for what you will, but like, I do not encourage lying. Leviticus 19:11 is extremely clear. We should not lie to one another. But we do see people lie from time to time.
And this is an act of war and protection.
David, when he was amongst the Philistines, he acted like a crazy man so they wouldn't kill him. So you see these moments where they like reach into their bag of tricks to try to like accomplish something. And, I don't know. I don't know if it was necessary. Clearly, righteous men do unrighteous things from time to time. We see that all throughout Scripture. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it's necessary, in my opinion, because it seems as if, as not just Jubilees, but Testament 12 patriarchs, the Testament of Levi, they had a divine decree from God that judgment was ready for the Shechemites. So Levi and Simeon were going to go take it. It's just it's a sticky wording. I agree with you.
Yeah. And I'm not saying I see it exactly that way. I'm just saying, as I was reading, I was like, well, sometimes it's good to break it down and talk about it, just to say, different point of view. That's all.
Honestly, I can see it where both groups would be deceitful and beguiling the other one. I can see the bad guys in this situation, pushing the narrative that they want to take her to wife because they're looking for future things, down the road to take all the rest of their wives and women and all that stuff. I can also see this as the boys were in a tough situation. They're like, you know what? Well, maybe we'll entertain this just so that we can keep you off your guard, so we can come in and handle some business. Yeah. So this, when we see the word deceit or beguiled, we automatically think in terms of really bad, lying, evil, something like that. But was it really, or was it more or less withholding information so that they could keep the conversation appeased in a timely fashion, so that they could, come back and handle business? Because if they said, no, we're about to mess y'all up, well, everybody would be prepared for war at that point, So if
Levi and Simeon wouldn't have had access as easy to get into the city and get Dinah out.
That's true.
Exactly. They
probably just walk right in. Oh, there's our brothers now. Okay, yeah, no.
And that's where, like, this scene, I know we've jokingly talked about how this whole thing with Jacob's life is one big movie, but this is a Quentin Tarantino moment. Have you ever seen any of his movies where, like, there's always this
Kill Bill?
There's well, just in almost all of his movies, there's like a 15 to 20 minute moments where there's like, someone's about to die. You just don't know how, and there's no music. It's just pure acting between the actors. You hear the sounds are amplified. So like in this moment, I just imagine they're showing up to talk with Hamar. Jacob and his boys are there. There's a crackling fire in the background.
Yep.
Simeon's, you hear the leather stretching on Simeon's sheath as he's gripping it as hard as he can under his cloak, and behind Jacob, Levi's putting his hand on Simeon's back to calm him. Not yet. Right. And they're just like, And they're just like having this weird, they know, like they both know they're bartering in vain for this concept. They both know they're not going to uphold this, but they're going through the motions so they can have time to plan. It's just like the ultimate Quentin Tarantino moment.
Yeah.
Well, that was an excellent visual, brother.
Well, and you can see that playing out that way, because Dinah's involved. Dinah's still there essentially as a prisoner, if you want to call it any better way to look at it. So, hey, let's not poke the beehive while our sister's still in the enemy camp. Let's keep the most peace, because we got to remember that Scripture, Torah, is all about life. And what's interesting about that is we go into verse 18 and it says, "And the seed of Levi was chosen for the priesthood, and the Levites might minister before Yahuwah continually." So clearly we have Levi and the priesthood well before Mount Sinai or any kind of Mosaic law, if you want to even call it that, because it's Yahweh's law, Yahuwah's law that was given to Moses to give to the people. So he was a messenger of said law. But if the Torah, if Leviticus, if Deuteronomy, all these books are there for life and for life to have it more abundantly, what they did was they protected the life of their sister. They set the scenario where there was peace. Now, that peace didn't and couldn't last based on the way that the angel wrote down in the law and the tablets and everything was like, hey, by the way, this is super bad. We can't do it. Never do this again. Hey, Moses, quick break. Make sure the people don't do this now, even though this was written in the past. We don't want to even make this go forward in the future. But this is Levi getting the priesthood because of what he did. He kept the peace and exacted judgment. And we got to remember, with judgment, there's the good and the bad side. This time, unfortunately, it was the bad side. But often Levi, later when he's full blown priesthood, he's judging on good stuff. Hey, this was righteous. Good job. I have judged you good. Hey, you have messed up. I have judged you bad.
Right. I gotta. If we were to all take this situation and put it to a modern day scenario, right? Like, what would happen if a group of marauders showed up at your door and I don't know, maybe there was
Are they masked? The masked marauder?
Possibly.
The masked marauder. Okay.
And there's been this group of people that's been going around and stealing children and yada yada yada, breaking in people's houses, stealing children and whatever, right? And so these people show up on your doorstep. And you've already got it planned out, and you tell your children what to do, and they know where to go hide and to be quiet and all this stuff. And when they come in and they finally come in, get in your house, and they say, "Are there any children in here?" And you say, "No, we don't have any children in here." Well, you're lying.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a bad thing or is that a righteous thing?
It's the intent of the heart. Torah to me is about life. So if you're preserving life,
exactly.
One, it's none of their business anyway. They shouldn't be there asking for my kids. And number two is, it's probably going to go a little bit further than that after that question gets asked. If capable.
Which is why I don't see that this deceit or beguilement.
Right. No, I see that as well.
A bad thing.
Yeah.
I really
see that as well. So to me, Tom, just like, hey, she's my sister. Did he lie? Well, technically she was.
Right.
Now, in verse 1 here, verse 2, it says they carried off Dinah. Now, we get this translation into English from the Greek, so we don't get, we can't really look up this word too well. But if I go into Deuteronomy 24:7, where it says do not kidnap, and I look up that word in the Hebrew, one of it is carried off is another definition for kidnap.
Very good.
Be carried off, carried away, carried off. And that's in all the concordances that I can find on Bible Hub. So that's interesting. So kidnapping is a capital punishment immediately.
Exactly. Yep.
So right from the beginning of the story, they're telling you someone's going to die.
Yep.
And now we're just going to play the details out, right?
Right.
How they play. And I agree with you. I don't think when they met with Hamar to create this deal and beguile them and speak deceitfully, I don't think Dinah was even in the room. Because she's been kidnapped.
Yep.
They're not just going to bring her to the negotiation and have her sitting down in the chair over there, Simeon starts swinging.
That's their ace in the hole, though. She's back where we are.
Exactly. Yeah.
So if you want her back, let's talk.
Right.
Yep.
I was saying, verse 24 does tell us that, and they brought Dinah, their sister, out of the house of Shechem. And they took captive everything that was in Shechem, their sheep and their oxen and their wealth and their flocks, and brought them all to Jacob their father. Now, it does say, when you go further now, it does say he reproached them because they had put the city to the sword, for he feared those who dwelt in the land, the Canaanites and the Perizzites, and the dread of Yahuwah was upon all the cities which are around about Shechem, and they did not rise to pursue after the sons of Jacob, for terror had fallen upon them. This is where I see maybe, with Jacob, hey, he's human.
Yeah.
What's happening here. But at the same time, because the rest of this chapter tells us they were righteous in what they did, God's like, don't worry about it. I'm going to take care of the whole situation. Matter of fact, because of what happened, you ain't got to worry about nobody touching you. Because they're going to hear the story, what happened. They're going to be like, we ain't messing with them. We ain't messing with them guys.
Yeah, he didn't just take down the ones that did the deed. He took them all. They took them all out.
Took it all, yeah.
Yeah, well, because they, as a people, had a history of doing this. So
You got it.
I think 21 through 23 is pretty interesting here. Well, actually, you know what? It says it even in chapter 9, verse 19 also. Can I just start in verse 18? I'm sorry. It says, the seed of Levi was chosen for the priesthood and to be Levites, that they might minister for the Lord as we, the angel speaking, as we continually do, and that Levi and his sons may be blessed forever, for he was zealous to execute righteousness, judgment, and vengeance. I mean, and he goes on to say, they inscribed a testimony in favor of the heavenly tablets, blessings and righteousness before the God of all, specifically in the context of him taking vengeance on the Shechemites. And then in verse 23, skipping down a little bit, on the day when the sons of Jacob slew Shechem, a writing was recorded in their favor in heaven, for they had executed righteousness, uprightness, and vengeance on the sinners. It was written for a blessing. I'm like, this is wild, because this is saying like Levi is given the priesthood because of this act, and this is the angel explaining this is explaining like because he was zealous to take out the evil. Like that is crazy. So like it's almost as if the angel is saying, this is how we feel. We minister to the Father as well. We share this same trait. You exemplify this trait. We're going to make you a minister to the Father too. That's everyone should be fearful for God's heavenly servants. That's the result of something like that, right? Because you're like, okay, because he was willing to do this for the sake of righteousness and judgment on behalf of the Father. Now, I'm not suggesting the Crusades. Don't get me wrong. I'm not suggesting this. Clearly, this is why I believe the Testament of Levi is so important. This was clearly by an angel spoken to Levi, and he even gave him the sword and the shield. You know what I'm saying? In the Testament of Levi. So like, I think it's very important that we have that extra information. But the fact that he went through with it, he executed it. He's being rewarded for this, and it's written in heaven as a blessing for him, specifically pertaining to the priesthood. That's amazing to me.
Yeah, you look at Sean, look at Phineas when he'd executed judgment, also righteous judgment. There was a blessing for him as well.
Right.
It's amazing. Yeah. All the priests during the day. Remember the 3,000 people were killed over the golden calf incident.
Exactly.
And it was the Levites who drew their sword and actually went and did it. You know, so it's wild, man.
Yeah.
That's but I mean, just think about all the historical cultures, all the other cultures throughout history that have glamorized this idea of the warrior priest. Buddhist monks, different types of assassins and different types of people, like all these different cultures. All these kinds of movies have been made about it, even dystopian futuristic movies about the warrior priest. And here we have our wonderful Messiah is coming back as a warrior, high priest forever.
Come to bring the sword.
Amen.
Coming up from Basra, whose clothes are stained in blood.
Well, and it's always interesting too, because our vision of angels, our modern rendition of angels is, what we talk about more often than not, especially, in the church arena, is guardian angel, angels of protection. It's always like this, sweet, loving, okay, I stopped the car before it hit you. And he's like, no. I mean, yeah, I am here to help you. Like, the angels right now helping Moses write all this down, and, the angels show up and help a lot. But he's like, but in reality, we're here to have righteous judgment. We're helping you because you are righteous. But we also have that same ability to then exact judgment on the unrighteous. And it's our desire to root that out, because where there is sin, God can't be there. He's like, the reason why I'm separate from you now is because of sin. So the angel's job is like, yeah, get the sin out of here so we can all do the thing that we were designed to do, is be together, praise the Father with these humans that he created, that he wanted to walk and talk with. It's just a whole nother perspective of the angels. And you can see maybe a little bit why when they see the angels, it's like they fall on their face. They're like, don't be afraid. They're like, well, what would they be afraid of? If they're just the loving, sweet guardian angel who sits on the porch and drinks sweet tea with you. You know what I mean? It's like, no, these guys were like, hey, you're lucky I'm here for a message, because otherwise it'd be game time.
I got to bring this up. Like this kept coming to my mind as we were reading this. You know, Levi was made the high priest for this reason. What was he doing? Executing righteousness and judgment and vengeance. And it says on those who arose against Israel. However, this was a very specific situation regarding a child. Let me read Matthew 18 real quick. Just a few verses. At that time, the disciples came to Jesus and said, "Who is greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" Then he called a child to him and had him stand among them. "I assure you," he said, "unless you are converted and become like children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever humbles himself like this child, this one is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And whoever welcomes one child like this in my name welcomes me. But whoever causes the downfall of one of these little ones who believe in me, it would be better for him if a heavy millstone were hung around his neck and he were drowned in the depths of the sea. Woe to the world because of offenses, for offenses must come, but woe to that man by whom the offenses come." The correlation I see here is just, it's amazing and beautiful.
Well, and look at the people who did bad in that same category on the opposite side. Wasn't Moses a child that was trying to be killed? Wasn't Yeshua a child who was trying to be killed? I mean, let's go back through some of those stories and you see the enemy's like, oh, I got God's playbook. I'm just going to do the opposite. I'm going to literally perpetrate evil as much and as often as possible to break these laws and these commands. I am the lawless one, right? When you read your scripture and it talks about, lawlessness, it's not doing God's ways. Well, there's a guy out there who's actively not doing God's ways. And it's the opposite of let the little children come to me. It's how do I get rid of all these little children? How fast can I remove the amount of little children in the world who may be raised and be immortal souls that give their life, their soul, their spirit over to the Most High and become heirs to the kingdom?
And take away their innocence.
Yep.
Yeah, so what do we get out of all this? We get Jacob literally walking out and living righteousness. We get him going up to Laban, choosing to do the right thing. He wasn't forced or coerced into anything. He got a message from the Father, got a vision and a dream, and he said, from this information, from these details, I know that I love that God, the God of my fathers, more than anything in the world, and I'll do anything to follow him, to live like him, and to walk in his ways. And then so through those righteous acts, we see, him having all these children. And out of what these children, you get Levi. And we find out, through the story, Levi's given the priesthood. One of the most important things that God and man has an interaction is through the priesthood. It's the way we receive atonement. It's the way that righteousness and the scriptures are upheld. It's the way that we can go boldly before the Father, is because we have a true high priest that since the death, burial, and resurrection of our King and Messiah is risen and is at the right hand of the Father right now, ministering as the high priest, that we can go boldly before the throne, knowing that he is our high priest. And Levi was doing the shadow. He was doing the version of it that we get to experience on our earth, while Yeshua's up in heaven currently doing the most awesome, perfect, non-shadow version, the reality of it. And what do we find out? That God loves these kids. God loves his children, all of his children, and we're all adopted as sons and daughters. So we're little kids in his eyes, I'm sure. And here he says, protect the kids, love the kids, take care of those kids. And if you come against the children, like Kyle read in that verse, it's not a good story, not a good ending for you. And so I just pray that as we walk out the rest of our lives, as we look at ourselves in the mirror, that we're children of the Most High, that we're the apple of his eye, we're the best of his creation. And each day he looks down on us and prays and looks at us and says, please live righteously so we can all be together one day, sit at the table and enjoy the kingdom that he's created for us.
Amen. And with that, Sean, again, brother, we thank you so much for coming on with us. We look forward to having you on for 31 through 40. And with that, guys, we will see you next time.
Thank you.
Shalom.
Shalom.
Ciao.